The year is 2025, Solvang, California. Sunlight radiated through the windows of the Elysium headquarters. In its cool stillness, rows of sleek, metallic pods lined the polished floor. Elysium was a virtual reality laboratory. Founded by a business magnate named Ursula von der Leyen III, they cracked the code on full sensory immersion. Furthermore, they achieved total sensory integration. Their Elysian enclave promised a full-body experience where the virtual felt real. The previous model, the Enclave MK, had garnered a cult following for its unparalleled realism. Players could feel the wind whipping through their virtual hair, as well as the coolness of digital rain on their skin. But there was a critical absence: pain. Without the sting of a virtual scrape or the ache of a virtual blow, the world felt incomplete. So, Elysium had taken the next, controversial step, integrating a dampened pain response. It wouldn't be crippling, just a slight discomfort would heighten the experience. Enough to make a virtual punch feel like a playful nudge or a fall from a virtual cliff, a jolt of adrenaline. Enough, they argued, to bridge the gap between the real and the unreal. And how do you expect the public to feel about this? A news anchor asked Ursula. Oh well, she said, we're still in the testing phase. Hence the reason why we've chosen 7 lottery winners across the world to be the first participants. The screen showed a display of the 7 winners. These were the pioneers, the first who would enter a world of consequence. Nothing life-threatening, but challenging enough to highlight the capabilities of the Enclave MK2 before its official release. I sure would love to be one of those 7, the news anchor laughed. Tell us, did you get a chance to speak to these winners? Not yet, she responded with a hint of amusement. I reviewed their background, however, and found them to be more than exemplary. Anyone in particular we all should know about? All of them are. The television screen abruptly shut off. In a neatly organized apartment bathing in sunlight, Arthur Bennett rose from the couch. A golden lottery ticket lay across his coffee table. Today was the day in which he would travel to Elysium and become one of the first to test out their latest invention. Arthur Bennett was born with a Bible tucked under his arm. Raised in an evangelical household, his childhood was filled with hymns and Sunday school lessons. Morality wasn't a suggestion, it was a divine decree, hammered into him by his stern father and loving mother. Their values seeped into his heart, shaping him into a man of unwavering principles without the freewheeling, self-indulgent world he observed around him. 1. Arthur wasn't naive, however. Early on, the harsh truths of the world stymied his beliefs. The slick-talking scammer fleeced his mother with false promises of new cookware sets. His own first attempt at literary fame for a novel titled Follow Christ ended up gathering dust in a rejection pile. Perhaps the biggest betrayal was when his college sweetheart, the girl he imagined walking down the aisle with, left him for a wealthier classmate. 4. Each experience chipped away at his trust, leaving behind a calloused cynicism. But Arthur, unlike many, didn't succumb to bitterness. He clung to his faith, drawing strength from the teachings of Jesus Christ, his Lord and Savior. 2. He prayed for wisdom, for the ability to navigate the complexities of the world without compromising his values. He believed, with unwavering faith, that God would guide him. It was this same faith that led him to where he is now, content, healthy and sharp. 1. Arthur's own personality is quite complex. He created his own persona, sometimes appearing cold and calculative, other times brimming with warmth and charm, depending on the situation. He saw these masks not as deceptions but as tools necessary to reach an audience increasingly desensitized to traditional preaching. His cynicism, however, did not translate into a lack of empathy. He understood the temptations of wealth and the comfort it offered. Yet he himself harbored no desire for riches. His true desire is to spread the gospel and offer hope and redemption to a world that desperately needs both. People sensed the calculating mind lurking beneath the surface, a soul they couldn't quite decipher. His convictions and his dedication to his cause earned him grudging respect, even from those who found him difficult to read. Today, as he stored his ticket to walk out the door with, the weight of his past experiences settled upon him. He wasn't just entering a groundbreaking technological experience, he was entering an opportunity. An opportunity to use this platform, this chance to reach a new audience and promote his book, which could help spread the gospel. It was a challenge he wouldn't shy away from. Exiting the driveway in his Corolla, he drove on the streets to where Elysium was. The California sun glinted off the building's mirrored exterior, making it look like a monolithic mirage in the heat haze. This wasn't a place he was used to frequenting, these gleaming towers of innovation compared to the church he regularly attended. Yet here he was, a born-again Christian about to delve into the heart of a technological revolution. Stepping out of his car, he walked towards the front entrance. A young security guard approached him with a polite smile. "Mr. Bennett?" he asked, glancing at the ID Arthur held up. "Welcome to Elysium, sir. Please follow me." The guard escorted him through the sterile lobby. Every surface gleamed, with hardly anyone inside. As they passed a large holographic display showcasing the previous Elysian Enclave model, Arthur felt a tad off. He'd read about the newer version, how it would supposedly take the world by storm. Finally, they reached the security checkpoint. The guard scanned his ID, and a fax machine printed his papers. "You all right, Mr. Bennett, you're all set. Dr. Kapoor is expecting you in testing room 1. Arthur offered a simple nod before walking forward. A sense of weightlessness settled in his stomach as he pushed open the doors, stepping into a brightly lit room staffed by technicians in lab coats. A woman, tall and impeccably dressed with a nametag reading Dr. Kapoor pinned to her lab coat, turned toward him with a bright smile, saying, "Mr. Bennett? So glad you could make it. We were just starting to worry." Arthur apologized, stating that he had discovered yesterday that he had won. Hearing that made Dr. Kapoor's smile falter for a moment. She blinked in disbelief, saying, "You only found out yesterday?" "I did," he said, his expression unchanged. "There was a delay in retrieving my messages." Dr. Kapoor cleared her throat, a hint of annoyance in her voice as she said, "Well, you're here now, thankfully. Hundreds of millions entered the lottery and—" She paused, searching his face. "You don't seem too excited." "Excited? Not at all, Dr. Kapoor. I'm grateful for the opportunity." Arthur's voice was calm and measured, despite his lack of enthusiasm. "All right," she said, her smile back in place. "Let's get you prepped then. You'll be joining the other participants in the waiting room." Arthur followed Dr. Kapoor, his gaze sweeping across the technology around him. Wires snaked like vines across the chrome surfaces, and expensive equipment buzzed. In the center of the chamber were 7 sleek pods that looked like something straight out of a science fiction film. This, he presumed, was the Enclave MK2. They reached the doorway and Dr. Kapoor ushered him inside. The waiting room was sterile white with furniture laid out. 6 people were already inside. Some sat on the couches arranged in a circle, some fidgeted with nervous energy, while others exchanged whispers. All heads turned towards Arthur, their expressions a mix of annoyance and curiosity. As Dr. Kapoor introduced him, he returned their gazes with uninterest. Everyone, this is Mr. Arthur Bennett, our final participant." A woman with red hair scoffed, "Finally. We've been waiting here for ages." "Calm yourself, Miss Campbell," Dr. Kapoor said. Before Arthur could identify who this girl was, a man in a designer suit rolled his eyes, saying, "Seriously? You couldn't even get here on time for a revolutionary breakthrough?" Arthur remained unfazed by some of their hostility. He understood their frustration. Winning this lottery was a coup, a chance to be on the bleeding edge of technology. That didn't stop his calm demeanor from standing out. As a collective sigh rippled through the room, he simply offered a gentle smile. Dr. Kapoor, sensing the tension, cleared her throat to say, "Be all right, everyone. Now that Mr. Bennett is here, we can proceed. Please take a moment to review the terms and conditions. Once you all sign the legal documents, we can move on to the next step." With that, she excluded herself, leaving the 7 participants in an awkward silence. Arthur retrieved a stack of paper and settled himself at a table in the corner. He began scanning the legalese until a voice broke the silence. "Hi there." He looked up to see a young man with cropped black hair and a radiant smile extending a hand. "I'm Alexander Costa from Portugal." Arthur shook his hand, choosing not to return Alex's warm smile. "Arthur Bennett. Nice to meet you." A blonde woman across the room hopped from the couch and joined them, saying, "I'm Jada Schmidt, from Germany." Her voice was a tad bubbly and very soft. "Don't take offense to that grumpy guy over there," she added, gesturing toward the man in the designer suit. "None taken." "He's Jasper Reza," Alex sighed, rolling his eyes. "Heir to the Reza Group in Persia. Thinks the world revolves around his oil money." Just then, the man slammed his pen down, saying with a sharp voice, "My family may have oil money, but they also have manners. Speak about me in private, not in front of the latecomer." Arthur chose to ignore the outburst. Turning back to Alex and Jada, he stated where he was born and raised, Oakland, Cali, but my family's originally from Mexico. "Can you speak Spanish?" Alex asked with glee. "A little, but Portuguese and Spanish are kind of different." "So, what brings you to a virtual reality experiment?" Jada softly asked. "I entered on a whim. Didn't think I'd win, but here I am." 1. Alex's eyes widened with perplexity as he said, "Just a whim? No lifelong dream of exploring virtual worlds?" The look on Jada's eyes hinted at curiosity, but before she could ask, another voice cut in, saying, "You're the religious type." Arthur looked up to see a young woman with long brown hair and very tan skin. Alice Dubois from France. 1. It's not religion, but I am interested in how you knew, he stated. 1. There she goes again, the voice said from across the room. Margaret Campbell, the only teenager here, a girl with dyed red hair and a bored expression. She stalked all of the winners after finding out who we were. It's not stalking, it's doing a quick background check on my competition, Alice tried to defend. But it's an experiment, said the remaining man. William Rodriguez from Argentina. He was older than the rest, sporting a neatly trimmed beard and glasses that perched precariously on his nose. We're not competing against each other or anything. 1. The others eventually returned to signing their documents in private. A sense of finality settled over Arthur as he scribbled his signature on the last page. He flipped back through the pages, double-checking the seemingly endless legalese, liability waivers, data collection agreements, disclaimers about unforeseen consequences within the virtual world. 1. Most of it was standard, but a few sections raised his eyebrows. They were strangely specific, asking for Arthur's dietary preferences, sleep habits, and even his favorite kind of music. Is all this really necessary? Jasper asked, thinking out loud. Well, duh, Alice answered. The Elysian Enclave MK2 tailors the virtual experience to the individual, creating a world based on your deepest desires and anxieties. The more they know about you, the more immersive the experience will be. Arthur considered this for a moment. It did make sense in a way. A truly personal virtual experience could be groundbreaking. Still, the level of detail felt intrusive. He shrugged it off and continued, encountering another set of questions that made him pause. Are you familiar with the fictional narrative titled Naruto? Below it was a simple checkbox. Arthur frowned. Why would an innovative VR experiment care about a 2-decade-old ninja anime? A glance around the room confirmed his suspicions. Alexander and Jada exchanged confused looks. Alice rolled her eyes. Margaret seemed vaguely interested. William remained impassive. No one else seemed to have noticed the odd question. Without hesitating, Arthur flipped to the first page, leaving the checkbox blank. Dr. Kapoor finally entered the room, her smile a little less practiced this time. Excellent, she said, it looks like you're all done. We can proceed. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment settling in. Arthur glanced around the group, a diverse mix of personalities united by this moment. He saw curiosity in Alexander's eyes, skepticism from Jada's, and a slight arrogance from Jasper's. Alice herself seemed bored, Margaret was impatient, and William was still enigmatic. Arthur, whose curiosity was piqued by the strange Naruto question, handed his forms along with the rest. Dr. Kapoor had a smile on her face after verifying all the papers were signed. Clapping her hands, she said, "Wonderful. Now if you'll all follow me." The door shut behind them as they were led to the main room. In the center were 7 sleek pods, each circling the other. This is the Elysian Enclave MK2, she announced, her voice filled with pride. Each one is meticulously calibrated to provide a unique, fully immersive virtual reality experience. She paused, taking in some of their odd expressions. The world you'll be entering is based on a popular Japanese anime series called Naruto. The room erupted in a cacophony of reactions. Alice scoffed, saying, "I anime? Seriously? The cartoon world?" Jasper wondered with contempt. "I signed up for cutting-edge technology, not playtime." Arthur, despite his reservations about something that wasn't faith-based, felt a little curious. He had heard of Naruto before but never bothered watching it. William piped up, asking, "How did Elysium acquire the rights to use Masashi Kishimoto's work?" Dr. Kapoor's smile was brittle as she said, "Rights? We don't have any rights. Besides, this isn't really Naruto. Call it a game that has similar qualities, nothing taken from anyone else's ideas." 1. Despite the grumbles and raised eyebrows, a grudging acceptance settled over the group. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and quibbling over the theme wouldn't change that. Each harbored their own reasons for participating, some selfless, some more pragmatic. One thing was clear: stepping into the virtual world of Naruto, which Arthur himself knew little to nothing about, was a risk everyone was willing to take. Dr. Kapoor, sensing their acceptance, distributed stacks of paper that detailed what this world would consist of: the chakra system, the different villages, and the ongoing conflict. Arthur scanned the densely packed pages, a growing frown showing itself on his face. The story of a mischievous orphan named Naruto Uzumaki, ostracized by his village for harboring a sealed devilish fox within him. That same boy's journey is to become the Hokage, the leader of his village. The document continued to delve into the complex social structure of ninja clans, each with their own unique fighting styles and special abilities called jutsus. They had a special system called chakra, the source of their power, and intricate hand signs used to unleash it. One particular character, named Sasuke Uchiha, caught Arthur's interest. Sasuke was written to have been a prodigy of the Uchiha clan, a peculiar clan known for their powerful Sharingan, eye technique and fire manipulation jutsus. His older brother Itachi Uchiha massacred their entire clan for complicated reasons. Consumed by his false desire for vengeance against Itachi, Sasuke became consumed, manipulated into abandoning his village for power. As Arthur skimmed past descriptions of powerful tailed beasts and legendary battles, he couldn't help but feel a sense of detachment. These characters, these conflicts, they all felt hollow, lacking the moral depth he craved. A pang of disappointment settled in his stomach. Was this it? Was this the platform he'd been hoping for? He glanced around the room, catching glimpses of reactions as diverse as the people holding the paper. Margaret was already halfway through. She seemed to have foreknowledge of what the premise was. No surprise, since she was an angsty teenager. Jada was flipping through pages with an optimistic grin. She also seemed to have understood the story well. Jasper's reaction was intriguing. His lips moved silently as he read. Even William, the reserved type, was sporting a thoughtful frown. Then, as Dr. Kapoor cleared her throat, Arthur understood what had upset William. "It's important to note," she said, "that the world you'll experience will be a unique iteration of Naruto. While the basic framework remains, the villages, chakra system, etc., the story itself will take unforeseen turns. Consider it an alternate timeline, a what-if scenario." This seemed interesting to Arthur. Perhaps he was entering a virtual world that the others seemed all too familiar with. His lack of knowledge wouldn't matter much. That same world they were all entering might be significantly altered. The low murmur in the room ceased as Dr. Kapoor folded her arms, saying, "Now for the core aspect of your experience. Your mission is simple: survive." Survive? Alice asked, eyes gleaming. "Oh wait, like fight battles and stuff?" Dr. Kapoor shook her head, answering, "Not exactly. The virtual environment will be incredibly real. Everything you see, hear, and feel will all be believable. The characters, their emotions, their reactions, all meticulously crafted to create true immersion." The idea of a ninja world so real that it blurred the line between what was real and what was a simulation felt exhilarating to others but unsettling to Arthur. And the story, Dr. Kapoor continued, "It's not static. Our AI is incredibly sophisticated. The narrative will adapt depending on your interactions with the world. The smallest decisions, the choices you make, they can have a cascading effect on the world around you. Jada, who had been devouring the information sheet about Naruto with surprising speed, raised her hand to ask, missions? Do we have to become ninjas and go on quests? No missions and no quests, Dr. Kapoor smiled. This is a free roam experience. Explore the world, interact with the characters, and forge your own path. There are no rules, no limitations. Everything you experience, from the landscapes to the characters' emotions, will feel real. Even. She paused, a playful glint in her eyes, physical sensations. Alex, who had been mostly silent until now, perked up at this. He drawled, asking with a suggestive smirk, does that include romantic interactions? 1. As Jasper gave Alice a cynical look, William turned red. Dr. Kapoor's smile widened to answer, I absolutely. As I said, this is a full sensory experience. Whether you choose to pursue those avenues is entirely up to you. Arthur couldn't care less about useless things like that. His mind was already racing, formulating strategies on how to navigate this new world. Before we proceed any further, she said, I have a question. How many of you are actually familiar with the Naruto series? Alex, Jada, Margaret, and William all raised their hands. Jasper remained stubborn at first, but when he glanced around, he let out an audible cough, sheepishly raising his hand. It was clear that the heir to the Reza group wasn't thrilled about admitting his knowledge of the series. Alice also raised her hand, saying, I watched it, but I stopped after. What was it called? Shippuden? Shippuden is the second part of the Naruto series. The third, called Boruto, Naruto's son, continued the franchise. According to the paper they all read, the simulation would consist of both filler arcs and movies. The third series, however, was excluded due to it being an ongoing one. Margaret's eyes glowed with excitement. This was like a treasure trove for true Naruto fans. William, despite being one of those fanatics, remained stoic. His knowledge was likely greater than Margaret's. Jada, though initially enthusiastic, offered a sheepish smile, admitting, I used to be obsessed, but then I grew up. The comment felt like a direct blow to William and Margaret. Arthur thought it was a wise choice. While familiarity with Naruto might offer advantages, it could also create biased expectations. Hence why Arthur himself, who was the only one never to have seen the series, could better navigate this ever-shifting world. Dr. Kapoor clapped her hands, bringing everyone's attention back to her, saying, wonderful. We have a diverse range of Naruto knowledge among ourselves. But don't worry, that knowledge will hardly be useful. What did that mean? Arthur looked to see Jasper furrowing his brows. Alex was perhaps the only excited one upon hearing that unexpected news. Are there any questions? Yeah, Alex said. What kind of characters do we get to be? Like, can we choose our fighting styles or appearances? That, my dear Alex, she said with a smile, is a surprise waiting to happen when you enter the pods. We wouldn't want to spoil the fun of discovery, now would we? Anticipation filled the group. The unknown always held a certain allure. Arthur, however, couldn't help but finish reading the information sheet he was holding. As he skimmed the details about jutsus and chakra flow, a peculiar thought struck him. Something was off about the original story. Dr. Kapoor, seeing Arthur reading, asked, something troubling you, Mr. Bennett? Yes, he finally spoke, drawing everyone's attention. These descriptions don't make sense. For instance, where do they get all the logs from using the substitution jutsu? And again, how is it that this is set in the Edo era, yet they have computers during the Pain Invasion arc? I'm also suspicious of how the main character was hated, despite his father saving the village, and bore the last name Uzumaki, a clan that helped form said village. A stunned silence descended upon the room. Margaret, the self-proclaimed Naruto expert, looked pale. Jada's eyes widened in disbelief. Even William, the nerdiest of them all, seemed surprised. How could they have missed it? It was staring them right in the face all along. And this was only a partial say. Arthur neglected to reveal the more apparent things like unworthy leaders, Naruto's obsession with Sasuke, and more. Dr. Kapoor, instead of appearing flustered, offered Arthur a slow, impressed smirk. She clapped her hands once, a sly glint in her eyes, saying, Bravo, Mr. Bennett. You've picked up on the inconsistencies quite quickly. Indeed, as I mentioned earlier, this is not your typical Naruto experience. We've taken the core concepts, the basic framework, and adapted them for a new narrative and a new set of rules. Only some of those inconsistencies were addressed. Exactly which ones? Jasper wondered. Dr. Kapoor remained silent, giving a professional smile. She was hinting out that they'd have to find out themselves. It seems we've covered everything, she announced. Let's get you settled into your pods. One by one, they followed her, a mix of apprehension and anticipation swirling on their faces. Arthur, still grappling with the revelation about the altered Naruto universe, entered his pod last. As he settled in, Dr. Kapoor explained the character selection process. The system will analyze your biological and psychological data and generate 7 distinct avatars best suited for the program. It's on a first-come, first-served basis. That made Arthur frown. First come, first served? It seemed like an arbitrary, almost whimsical detail, implying that since he was late, he'd have to choose his character last. She continued, her voice gaining a more serious tone, there's no time limit within the simulation. Your primary directive, as I mentioned earlier, is to survive, so have fun. Arthur felt suspicious as he noticed Dr. Kapoor come close to his pod. Her voice was devoid of its earlier cheerfulness. Remember, she said, try not to die. In there, it'll be for real. 2. The weight of her words slammed into Arthur. Did he hear that correctly? No, he must have heard wrong. But the look she gave him said otherwise, an evil smirk that looked all too serious. Before he could say anything, the lights within the pod dimmed, plunging him into darkness. Arthur blinked against the sudden, blinding whiteness. The pod he'd been in moments ago was gone, replaced by an all-white room devoid of any features except the smooth floor beneath his feet. He was sure he wasn't outside, yet he could feel the cold air permeating the void. This was it. He was inside an authentic virtual world. A holographic screen appeared before him, floating a few feet away. He approached it, hearing his shoes echo across the area. As he touched it, a series of holographic pages and scenes materialized before him. The scenes depicted the characters, objects, and places within the world he would embark on. On the first page, it displayed various texts identifying the pod he was currently in. These things were already explained to him, so he skipped them. The next page displayed a series of bulleted points titled Important Notes. Arthur skimmed through the list, each point raising new questions. It appeared hunger and thirst were real concerns within the simulation. Our bodies would feel exactly like we were outside the pod if we didn't give it its needed sustenance. This was strange. Why would Elysium introduce something like this into the experiment? Arthur continued to read that ignoring these warnings could lead to exhaustion and even dehydration, mirroring real-world consequences. Hygiene, too, seemed to be critical. Contracting an illness was possible if proper hygiene wasn't maintained. This level of detail was unexpected. The following points dealt with the world itself. Before reading that, something caught his eye, friendly fire enabled. A brief explanation outlined the lack of restrictions on player interaction. He could team up with others, yes, but he could also attack them as if it were a player versus player scenario or PvP. The uneasiness of it all finally settled in. Perhaps he didn't have ideas of teaming up with anyone, that didn't mean they wouldn't attack him. Arthur could already tell from some of their personalities that players like Jasper would relish the idea of fighting him. With a final swipe, the holographic pages dissolved, replaced by a warning glowing in red, this is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real or fictional worlds is purely coincidental. Arthur scoffed a little. The warning then changed to display a detailed breakdown of the world Arthur was about to enter. Text flowed across the surface, accompanied by visuals that brought the narrative to life. Naruto, the character, was born in a village known as the Hidden Leaf Village. A monstrous fox, the Ninetails, named Kurama, was released by one of the antagonists and attacked the village. Its enormous size and ferocious visage were enough to frighten men. The text described its immense power and how a single swipe of its tail could cause widespread destruction. This creature was known as a eight-tailed beast. 9 of them were created out of the chakra from the original tailed beast called the Ten Tails. The scene shifted, showcasing Naruto's father, Minato Namikaze, who was also the fourth Hokage, the previous leader of the village, facing off against the Nine Tails. The text explained his valiant act of sealing the fox in his newborn child. As Arthur read the story, he couldn't help but find it strange that the father didn't reseal part of the fox back into his wife, the original carrier of the beast, known as a Jinchuriki. The image of Naruto appeared next. He was a young boy with spiky blonde hair and bright blue eyes. Though he was smiling in the hologram, Arthur could vividly tell that there was a hint of sadness lurking beneath his features. The text revealed the truth: Naruto wasn't just any child, he was the reincarnation of the son of the ninja who spread his teachings, which led to the creation of the ninja world. That ninja's name was Hagoromo Otsutsuki, son of the real antagonist of the story, Princess Kaguya Otsutsuki. Arthur could hardly make sense of what he was reading. He hoped the story would gain some clarity as he watched the scene morph into a bustling village filled with traditional Japanese architecture. This was the Hidden Leaf Village. The text explained how the villagers, despite celebrating the fourth Hokage's sacrifice, ostracized Naruto. They viewed him as a monster, the embodiment of the Nine Tails they feared. The image dissolved again, replaced by a lone figure sitting on a rooftop overlooking the village. It was a depiction of Naruto's isolation. The text described his childhood as one filled with loneliness, devoid of friends or family. Shunned by the villagers, he resorted to pranks and mischief in a desperate attempt for attention. He would eventually come to the realization that the only way for him to garner respect was to become the Hokage himself. 3. A new scene unfolded, showing Naruto facing a series of enemies. The text explained how his actions to protect everyone revealed every turning point in the plot. Through these encounters, he not only learned to tame the Nine Tails inside him, but he also managed to redeem his best friend and become the Hokage in the end. As the holographic screen flicked off, Arthur felt a wave of emotions wash over him. The story of Naruto wasn't at all good. Filled with themes of isolation, friendship, and perseverance, it contradicts itself one too many times, having copied things from other anime, including that of the Bible. The characters are inherently overpowered and inconsistent with said power. It's filled with convoluted techniques that can raise the dead. It undercuts its own message that hard work profits when the main character is gifted everything from birth. 1. Perhaps the worst thing is that Naruto can redeem even the most hardened villains through a simple heart-to-heart conversation that fans lovingly or not so lovingly refer to as talk no jutsu. While their change isn't hard to believe, it's the notion that it happens one too many times, causing poor pacing. 2. After Arthur refreshed himself on things, he considered the overall mission to survive. It was a little vague, but if there's one thing he knew about survival, it was to stay strong and faithful. This world has a variety of ways to get strong. All one truly needed was a large chakra reserve. Chakra is the force made up of spiritual and physical energy that ninjas use to perform jutsus. It flows through a network of channels in the body and can be molded and released through pressure points. Skilled ninjas can build up large chakra reserves and control them precisely to create powerful techniques. Chakra comes in different colors unique to each person and can be sensed by other ninjas. It takes time and training to develop good chakra control, which is essential for using jutsu effectively. There are different methods for manipulating chakra, such as shape transformation, controlling form and movement, and nature transformation, adding an element like fire or water. Other than that, chakra can come in various forms, such as tailed beast chakra, sage chakra, and dark chakra. Arthur skimmed back to the important notes section. The mention of characters like Zetsu having watered-down abilities intrigued him. Zetsu was Kaguya's manifested will, and he spent centuries trying to revive his mother. His notable skill was to travel to almost anywhere in the world and spy on others without being detected. Nerfing that character could create a more balanced playing field for newcomers. Conversely, since he was weakened, other unnamed characters were boosted to add a layer of unpredictable danger. The story would also begin a couple weeks before Naruto's official ninja graduation. This buffer period offered precious time to acclimate to the virtual world. There was more in regards to these character changes. Since every interaction and every choice made will have lasting consequences, characters, including the main ones, could be killed permanently. There would be no way to revive them without special techniques. The final bits of information clarified the starting point. All players would be registered as citizens of the Hidden Leaf Village, with their starting resources, money, chakra, and power, determined squarely by their chosen character. Interested in what characters could be chosen, he hovered his finger over the Character Creation AI option. A holographic image materialized before him. Unlike the detailed avatars he'd expected, this was a reflection staring back at him. A younger version of himself, to be precise. He looked about 12 or 13 years old, his features still boyish, but with a hint of the man he would become one day. It was understandable that he'd be limited to his youthful self. Considering that the main characters were also still young, it made sense to help them better interact in their story. However, his own character hardly looked imposing. He stood at barely 4 feet 6 inches with a lanky 100-pound build. His short brown hair stuck out in all directions, and his brown eyes held trepidation. Upon pressing the image, a tingling sensation spread through his body, starting at his fingertips and crawling its way upwards. His clothes dissolved, replaced by a simple brown tunic and loose-fitting trousers. He flexed his hand as he noticed the calluses and rough skin being replaced with soft flesh. This wasn't just a visual change, it felt real and tangible. The holographic screen flicked again, displaying a new prompt: clan selection. Clans were hereditary lineages within the ninja world, each renowned for unique abilities passed down through generations. They're like family units in their respective villages. Though they were used to fighting each other, many of them came together to form said villages. 7 options materialized before Arthur. The first 5 were names that he recognized: Uzumaki, Senju, Uchiha, Otsutsuki, and Hyuga. These are undoubtedly the world's top clans, according to his memory. The Uzumaki cements chakra reserves, the Senjus would style jutsus, the Uchiha's Sharingan eyes, the Otsutsuki's alien lineage, and the Hyuga's Byakugan eyes with their near 360-degree vision. Following these illustrious names stood a 6th option: random Hidden Leaf Village clan. The prospect of a surprise lineage held a certain appeal. It could be one of the many well-known clans that were raised to be just as strong as the aforementioned. Finally, the last option gleamed at the bottom: a clanless. Arthur's gaze drifted towards the Uzumaki clan. Although it was grayed out, it was worth looking into. Their clan was remembered by their symbol, a spiraling circle. In addition to being the main character's clan, they were associated with powerful sealing jutsus, techniques that could seal almost anything. Arthur reached out, his finger hovering over the selection. Disappointment gnawed at him as the image remained stubbornly grayed out. A message appeared beside it: unavailable selection. He quickly shifted his focus to a selection that wasn't grayed out: the Uchiha clan. This clan had the infamous legendary Sharingan, powerful eyes to be used for both offense and defense. Before he could tap the option, a new message materialized: clan selection pending. Wait for other players. Arthur furrowed his brows. This was ridiculous. He'd been the last one to enter the virtual world, and now it seemed his selection possibilities were being limited. Now he fully understood what Dr. Kapoor meant by first come, first serve. As the seconds went by, his frustration intensified. The Uchiha clan faded to gray, followed by the Senju clan, the Otsutsuki clan, and then the Hyuga clan. He couldn't even tell who was choosing what. With a defeated sigh, Arthur watched as the random Hidden Leaf Village clan option also vanished, leaving only the clanless selection. The other players, whoever they were, had already claimed their legacies, leaving him with the barest option. What exactly did each clan offer? He flipped through the taken clans with a growing sense of resignation. Each one offered unique advantages, hinting at the diverse strategies his fellow players were likely pursuing. The Uzumaki clan allowed the player to start off with a seemingly endless well of chakra. A sum of 1,000 ryo, the currency of the world, would also be provided. 1,000 ryo would be equivalent to 150,000 American dollars. Perhaps the most enticing perk is the ability to select any sealing technique of their choosing. Sealing techniques were powerful jutsus, capable of trapping even the most formidable opponents. It was no surprise that this was the first clan to become unavailable. With such a potent mix of advantages, it would be a prime target for any aspiring ninja. Arthur couldn't help but suspect William or Margaret, the two with the deepest knowledge of Naruto lore, had snagged it. Next was the Uchiha clan, whose symbol resembled a stylized fan. Choosing this clan would give the player a 100% success rate in awakening the Sharingan. This was insane. The Sharingan is a powerful eye technique known as a dojutsu exclusive to the Uchiha clan. It awakens with intense emotions often involving loss. And once activated, it grants the user special abilities. Such abilities include, but are not limited to, seeing chakra flow, taijutsu, ninja martial arts, and predicting movements. Awakening the Mangekyo Sharingan, a more advanced form with unique abilities like Amaterasu, inextinguishable black flames, and Tsukuyomi, a powerful illusion, requires experiencing a great emotional trauma, often the death of a loved one. However, overuse of the Mangekyo can lead to blindness. There are ways to restore sight, but they typically involve transplanting the Mangekyo of another Uchiha. The player has not only a guaranteed awakening, but advancement to the Sharingan's more powerful forms is certain. There was also a choice between Susanoo, a powerful spectral armor, and either Amaterasu or Tsukuyomi. Both were incredible, since the former could incinerate almost anything it touched. Upon reaching Sharingan's advanced form, the player would develop a unique ability based on their personality, adding a layer of customization. Not only would the player receive a respectable sum of 500 ryo, they would also be offered village protection against greedy individuals seeking their Sharingan. This clan screamed power. Arthur could easily imagine someone like Jasper, the player with a clear desire for dominance, choosing this path. The Sharingan's combat prowess was undeniable, and the potential for a custom ability added unfairness. Next up was the Senju clan, the clan in which the main character's spiritual ancestor formed. The benefits here felt more balanced but no less potent. Similar to the Uzumaki, a player who selected the Senju clan would have formidable chakra reserves. Chakra is essential in this world. With a lot of it, a ninja wouldn't run out of stamina too quickly during a fight. The player would also have a 50% change in 3 different categories. They could inherit wood style, one of Tsunade Senju's signature techniques, and have the potential to possess their own natural healing factor. Wood style was a unique nature manipulation technique that allowed its user to control and shape wood itself. Tsunade was stated to become the 5th Hokage and was physically strong enough to throw objects miles away. As for regeneration, it was a rare thing, allowing the user to recover from injuries at an accelerated rate. And there were still more benefits. A pre-existing pact with the Slugs, a race of powerful and intelligent creatures known for their healing abilities, was already established. The player could choose 2 elemental affinities, the basic building blocks of jutsu, to specialize in. And lastly, 700 ryo awaited the player. This clan was a powerhouse in its own right. It was a formidable option because of its potential for wood style, Tsunade's techniques, and self-healing. Only one drawback existed: if the player chooses this clan and their background is discovered, they'll become targets for their cells. Arthur continued to flip through the next clans. The Otsutsuki clan, a clan symbolized by a crescent moon. A player who chose this would have a blend of power and risk. Like the Uzumaki and Senju, they get immense chakra reserves. A 50% chance awaited, the possibility of awakening either the Byakugan, an eye with near 360-degree vision and the ability to see chakra flow, or the Sharingan. If the Byakugan was awakened, a guaranteed evolution to the Tenseigan, an even more powerful eye with unique abilities, was assured. They would also acquire a unique trait called Tailed Beast Whisper, an aura surrounding them that could help them befriend the tailed beasts. As a start, the player could choose any one jutsu from a pre-made list of techniques used by various Otsutsuki clan members. This clan was the epitome of high risk, high reward. The potential for the Tenseigan and a pre-existing jutsu was tantalizing. Perhaps the only downside to choosing this clan was that the player would start with 0 ryo. Arthur suspected Alex, the analytical type, might have gravitated towards this option. Next was the Hyuga clan. The benefits here were more focused on combat. Similar to the Uchiha's Sharingan, the player was guaranteed the awakening of the Byakugan, the aforementioned eye with exceptional vision and chakra perception. Unlike the Sharingan, the Byakugan couldn't evolve further. However, the player could refine its vision, unlocking the full 360-degree view instead of the standard near 360 degrees. The player would also have an easier time learning taijutsu, a fighting style focused on hand-to-hand combat and utilizing the body's natural potential. Following, the player could choose one jutsu each from Niji Hyuga and Hinata Hyuga, two prominent members of the clan with unique fighting styles. A significant drawback existed: the player would start as a member of the Hyuga branch family, a subordinate group within the clan. This meant having a cursed seal on their forehead, a mark of subservience. The final one was like clan roulette, in which the player would be randomly assigned one of the three clans, Nara, Akimichi, or Yamanaka. These clans, though powerful when working together, weren't as individually renowned as the others. Regardless of which of those three clans they would start with, they would automatically receive 5,000 ryo. Arthur jolted awake, the world coming into focus with a jarring snap. Cold, damp stone pressed against his back. A single torch cast long shadows across a cramped cell. He was in prison. The tang of blood in his mouth was a grim reminder of the events that led him here. Disorientation gave way to a crushing sense of dread. He couldn't tell how long he had been unconscious. He tried to rise, but a surge of panic overtook him as he felt the weight on his limbs. Heavy chains bound him to the floor, restricting how far he could move. Every muscle in his body ached. The world outside this virtual one had always seemed harsh, but this was beyond cruel. He wouldn't accept his fate. With a ragged breath, he threw his head back and screamed, "Dr. Kapoor! This has gone too far. You can let me now." He didn't care if it sounded pathetic, he needed to be heard to break the suffocating silence. "Dr. Kapoor! I'm done. Unplug me from the machine." His outburst was met with silence, broken only by the dripping of water somewhere in the darkness. Quit messing with me, you pretentious." How about you quit yappin' wire mouth?" the figure sneered, barging through a door. The sound sent chills down Arthur's spine. He had cried out to end the experiment but was met with a hulking figure, shrouded in shadow by the doorway. "One more outburst like that," the figure said, "and I'll come in wire cell and break wire bones." The figure then chuckled before slamming the door behind him. Arthur felt scared, a feeling in which had not felt in a long time. He understood the gravity of the situation. This wasn't a game anymore, this was a world of violence where his life was at stake. He squeezed his eyes shut and a sob escaping his lips. The world of ninjas promised adventure and a chance to prove themselves. Instead, it had led him to a nightmare in which there was no waking. The loneliness pressed down on him, a suffocating weight that threatened to crush him. Staring into the abyss of his despair, he couldn't help but wonder if he'd ever see the light of day again, virtual or otherwise. Tears welled up in his eyes, blurring his vision. Regret gnawed at him, regret for his naivete, for believing that he, out of hundreds of millions of people, was randomly selected to experience a groundbreaking discovery like virtual reality. Who's to say the others weren't in on this? Look at Jasper, heir to the Reza throne. For all Arthur knew, his family could have bought his way into the experiment. Then there was Alice, who seemingly did a thorough background check on him, knowing that he was a Christian. What about Margaret, Jada, or William? Arthur understood that anime was a popular, on-demand form of entertainment, but they came into this experiment with extensive knowledge. It was almost as if they knew about it in advance. And Alex? Arthur's memory never betrayed him. Alex was the only person Dr. Kapoor never addressed formally. She called him "my dear Alex." Arthur had been a fool to trust this scheme, he was a fool to trust the world. For it is even written in the Holy Scriptures, "It is better to trust in the Lord than to put confidence in man." The next day, the torch sputtered and died, plunging the cell into darkness once more. It was only twice that a guard opened the door to bring Arthur a chipped cup of water. Arthur gulped it down, the meager offering doing little to quell the hunger in his stomach. Because of the chains, he urinated himself, reeking his own piss. Sleep was hard due to the throbbing pain in his body. Hours passed, measured only by the dripping water in the distance. Arthur, defeated and humiliated, found solace in the quiet recitation of Bible verses his parents read to him at night. Each familiar passage offered hope, a connection to his life before this virtual nightmare. As the night wore on, he understood something. This wasn't some fever dream or elaborate prank, this was a virtual world meticulously crafted to test his limits. And despite the pain, the fear, and the utter humiliation, a spark ignited within him. They wouldn't break his spirit. He wasn't some hero destined to save the day. No, in this world of darkness, a hero wouldn't survive in this cell, let alone be placed inside it. Here, only the ruthless, the cunning, and the ones who reveled in power thrived. That's when it hit him, the only way out of this twisted game was to become the very monster they feared. Arthur's eyes, previously filled with despair, now held a steely resolve. He wouldn't play by their rules, he would become the villain, a force of destruction so absolute that the creators of this world would have no choice but to release him. No smile played on his lips. Only a chilling counterpoint to the grime that caked his face. He didn't know how, he didn't know when, but he would annihilate this world, brick by bloody brick. He would become a legend, not of heroism but of sheer, unadulterated terror. This virtual world may have imprisoned him, but it had underestimated one crucial factor: God's wrath. On this night, a villain was born. No longer the ignorant newcomer, he was now a predator waiting for his opportune moment to strike. And the moment he understood that, the torch outside sputtered back to life. "This world will know my name," he rasped. "And they will tremble." At this proclamation, Arthur recalled the story's antagonists. From start to finish, the first villain was a mercenary named Zabuza. He held one of the 7 legendary swords, the Executioner's Blade, letting his ambition and thirst for power drive him to betray his village, the Mist Village. Though initially presented as a villain, Zabuza met his end at the hands of Kakashi Hatake, the main character's teacher. Arthur wouldn't become a one-dimensional mercenary. He would use his knowledge to manipulate others, building power before striking. Next up was Orochimaru, a power-hungry sannin or legendary ninja. Obsessed with immortality and forbidden techniques, he experimented on countless individuals, including the second main character, Sasuke Uchiha. Orochimaru's thirst for knowledge led him down a dark path several decades ago, ultimately resulting in his redemption during the Boruto series. Arthur wouldn't fall victim to the same obsession. He'd use forbidden techniques for power, but he'd remain focused on his ultimate goal: escape. Something fascinating about the story was that it cycled through antagonists. Orochimaru was the main threat during the first part. The second part, however, had a powerful ninja from the Rain Village named Nagato Uzumaki. Like the surname suggests, Nagato was part of the Uzumaki clan. His group of mercenaries referred to him as Pain. Pain was a pawn. Driven by the horrors of war and loss, he sought to achieve world peace through dominance. Naruto eventually defeated Pain, showing him a different path to peace. Arthur wouldn't ever change his mind, nor would he be manipulated by others. He would use his charisma and cunningness to build his own foundation. But who could be so methodical as to manipulate an Uzumaki? Obito Uchiha, the next antagonist who publicly began running the scenes after Nagato's death. Obito was a talented young ninja who believed the world was a cruel place filled with suffering. After witnessing the death of his teammate, Rin Noera, he became disillusioned and fell under the manipulation of another antagonist, Madara Uchiha. Obito was written to have orchestrated numerous events from the shadows, including the Ninetales attack on the Leaf Village, ultimately aiming to cast an illusion on the entire world to make it perfect. He was eventually defeated by Naruto Uzumaki, and was redeemed by sacrificing himself to save Naruto's life. That was perhaps one of the most convoluted acts in the story since he was won over the main character's talk no jutsu. Some would say that Arthur's predicament was like Obito's. But Arthur would never be burdened by misplaced loyalty. He would be ruthless and calculated, sacrificing anyone for his own goals, unlike Obito's initial attachment to his comrades. However, Arthur would use the art of manipulation to orchestrate events from the shadows if necessary. He could build his power base and influence subtly, striking fear into the hearts of his enemies before revealing his full might. Next up was the aforementioned Madara Uchiha. A legendary figure and co-founder of the Leaf Village, Madara sought to control the tailed beasts and use them to create an illusionary world peace. Since he had died, he was revived by a ninja named Kabuto Yakushi and eventually defeated by Naruto and Sasuke. Arthur wouldn't be consumed by a naive vision of peace. He would use the tailed beasts for his own personal gain. The last main villain, the one whom hardly anyone who knew of the series expected, was Kagaya Otsutsuki. Kagaya was the progenitor of all chakra. She wasn't originally a villain, but rather a devil from outer space who arrived on Earth to cultivate a parasitic tree that drained life force from the planet. Consumed by the power of the tree's chakra fruit, she became a tyrannical ruler, manipulating men and harvesting their chakra. She was eventually sealed away on the moon by her sons, Hagoromo and Himura, only to be released, only to be defeated by Hagoromo's sons incarnates, Naruto and Sasuke. There was a reason why few fans saw her appearance coming. It was because the writer made stuff up as the story progressed. Kaguya wasn't a flashy villain, she played the long game, manipulating men for centuries, through her manifested will named Zetsu before revealing herself. Arthur could adopt this strategic approach, but he would have less than 4 years to do so. What would distinguish Kaguya from him is that he wouldn't be a power-hungry tyrant, but a cunning manipulator who used his foreknowledge to win this game. Fueled by his newfound purpose, Arthur shuts his eyes, pushing the chill of the cell and throbbing pain to the back of his mind. He needed focus, clarity, and the ability to tap into the power source of this world, chakra. Chakra was the life force that fueled all ninjas. It was a potent blend of physical and spiritual energy, swirling within every being in this world. Skilled ninjas could channel this energy, molding it to perform extraordinary feats like walking on walls and breathing fire. But just having chakra wasn't enough. Control was paramount. The main character, who perhaps had the most chakra out of everyone at one point, was hardly able to control it. An untrained ninja with a vast amount of chakra would be like a flimsy dam holding back this force. The energy would burst forth irrepressibly, leaving them exhausted and vulnerable. Arthur remembered 2 particular ninjas, Rock Lee and his teacher, Might Guy. These two, despite their exceptional physical prowess, were unable to utilize the traditional methods of harnessing chakra. But that didn't mean they didn't still have it inside them. Arthur settled into a meditative pose. His mind, honed by years of praying and learning philosophy, became still. An unknown amount of time passed. The pain threatened to shatter his focus, but he preserved it. He visualized a single point of light within himself, a tiny pool of water. Then, a faint sensation. A tingling warmth bloomed deep within his core. It wasn't much, but it was real. This was chakra. He remained calm and collective, reminding himself that harnessing was nothing, control was important. Focusing on that tiny pool, he visualized it spreading like ripples in his mind. With excruciating slowness, he willed a minuscule amount of that energy outward. It felt like pushing against a wall of resistance, and his muscles were straining with the effort. Finally, with control, he felt a shift. It wasn't a dramatic burst of energy, but a subtle change, like the air around him had grown a degree cooler. He slowly opened his eyes. With one look at the torch and a sudden whoosh, the flames sputtered and died, plunging the cell into blackness. It wasn't a parlor trick, this was the raw power of the ninja world. He might be a prisoner, but he was also a ninja. How was it that he managed to control his chakra so easily? Simple, he was clanless. The less chakra someone had, the easier it was to manipulate. The damp chill of the cell seeped into Arthur's bones, but it was nowhere near the cold sensation compared to the ice that gripped his heart. A muffled conversation could be heard through the bars, the voice of a guard outside. They finally found a buyer, the guard rumbled. 2 days, that's what they said. Less work for us, eh? A buyer? Arthur's mind raced. There was only one explanation, they were selling him. Rather than panic, he began to think. 2 days. I have 2 days left. The situation was far from ideal, but 2 days wasn't a death sentence. It was enough time, with his newfound understanding of chakra, to learn some basic but crucial techniques. He was clanless, meaning that he had an easier time learning support techniques. What was categorized as support were things like buffing, debuffing, and healing. Healing techniques were invaluable on the battlefield, allowing ninjas to mend wounds and restore stamina during combat. One particular technique that he remembered countless ninjas performing, even the lower-ranked ones, was the generic healing jutsu. To execute certain techniques, one is required to first perform hand signs. Hand signs are hand gestures ninjas use to focus their chakra and unleash their jutsus. Each jutsu requires a specific sequence of hand signs, and memorizing these sequences is crucial. Skilled ninjas can use fewer or even one hand sign for the same jutsu, showing their control. Hand signs also reveal the type of jutsu under preparation, providing a tactical advantage. Some rare ninjas could even perform signs with another person's hand as a substitute. There are also some exceptions where ninjas don't use hand signs at all, especially for techniques focused on speed. Arthur closed his eyes, remembering one such sequence for the basic healing technique. It wasn't complex, but it required precise control of chakra flow. He brought his hands together, forming a specific sign, the right hand horizontally interlocking with the left hand vertical, ox. Focusing all his energy on the tingling warmth in his core, he could visually see chakra flowing through his arms and converging at his fingertips. It was a delicate procedure, a constant push and pull between channeling enough chakra to be effective and maintaining control to avoid a burst. Sweat beaded on his brow as the strain intensified. Without a moment's notice, the feeling ceased and he failed. He had felt his initial burst of chakra dwindling until the fatigue set in. But he wouldn't give up, he couldn't. Not here, not ever. Repeating the signs, his movements were smoother this time. He channeled his chakra again. A slight tingle spread from his palms. Feeling the flow and directing it where it needed to be, he opened his eyes and saw a faint, cerulean glow in his hands. He had done it. He had performed a rudimentary healing technique. Given his predicament, the excitement was short-lived. Yes, performing a jutsu on one's second attempt was a congratulatory feat, but this was just baby steps. He still had a long way to go. 2 days were given to learn as much as possible, to hone his control, and to build a small arsenal of techniques. He gave a low growl, feeling no longer afraid. The initial burst of exertion, followed by the struggle to control his fledgling chakra, left him drained. His limbs felt like lead weights, and his eyelids drooped with heaviness. Resigned, he settled back on the cold stone floor, the ever-present dampness, and the foul stench of his own waste. To recover one's chakra naturally, he needed to rest. Hours passed by. There were no windows in this cell, so he had no way of gauging the passage of time. But his body kept a silent record. The throbbing in his muscles gradually subsided, replaced by aches. He knew with certainty that his chakra was slowly replenishing. When he felt like he could handle the strain again, he slowly sat up and performed the healing technique. Relief flooded his senses as he pressed his glowing palms against his wounds. It wasn't just the dull ache that receded, he could feel, with an almost absurd clarity, the very cells in his body responding. Damaged tissue knitted itself back together, torn ligaments mended at an accelerated rate, all propelled by an invisible force. The dried blood in his mouth finally vanished. Even the pervasive stench of his confinement seemed to lose its edge. For the first time, he felt a sense of control amidst this evil world. But caution tempered his optimism. Nothing was worth celebrating. Completely healing his wounds would attract suspicion, drawing the attention of his captors. He needed to remain under the radar as much as possible to appear weak while growing stronger in his cell. With a thought, he limited the flow of chakra, allowing the healing to reach a point of functionality rather than complete restoration. By the time he finished, he left himself with a few minor scratches, not enough to raise any alarms. Arthur had tasted the power of healing, now he craved something on the offensive end, something not related to jutsus, a solid foundation. How he was able to get away with killing a leaf ninja was because of taijutsu. That ninja's taijutsu was strong, but it wasn't compared to the bandits'. Taijutsu is a martial art that involves using one's natural physical abilities in combat. Unlike other fighting styles, it required no hand signs and focused on the ninja's physical strength and stamina. That made taijutsu a quick and efficient way to fight, though some techniques can be enhanced with chakra. While most ninjas use taijutsu, a select few like Rock Lee specialize in this style, perfecting powerful moves like the dynamic entry and the gleef whirlwind techniques. Ninjas who were good at taijutsu could move faster than sound or leave behind afterimages. That kind of raw power, that kind of speed, that's what Arthur needed. Throwing himself onto the cold stone floor without rattling the chains, he began a grueling series of push-ups. Each repetition was a battle cry against his circumstances, a defiant push against the limitations of this cell. Sweat slicked his skin and the stale air became heavier. 101, 102, 103. His muscle fibers tore, begging for respite. But he ignored them, fueled by a burning desire to break free. By the time he reached 350, his vision had blurred slightly. Finally, his arms gave way, collapsing with a heavy thud. He lay there gasping, his lungs burning and his chest heaving up and down. He then gritted his teeth at how weak he was. Yes, 350 push-ups for a 12-year-old body were very impressive, but it was nothing in this world. Characters like Mike Guy, Rock Lee's teacher, was able to do over 700 before feeling exhausted. But there was something Arthur had that they neglected to use, a healing technique. With trembling hands, he formed the familiar hand sign and began mending his muscles. The fibers rebuilt themselves, growing denser and becoming more efficient. He felt an electric-like sensation as his cells went into overdrive. It was painful at first, but with each passing moment, he was pushing his body beyond its natural limits, refueling his aching muscles to return to training. Now that he was fully healed, squats came next. He pushed himself again, each repetition more perfect than the last. 600. Not bad, but far from exceptional. The elite ninjas he'd seen could have easily doubled that number. He healed himself again and began doing sit-ups, the cold stone floor biting into his lower back with each crunch. 250. Exhaustion threatened to pull him under, but he used the healing technique again. Tentatively he flexed his arms. The response was immediate, strength that surprised even him. He felt lighter, his body was more compact and responsive. He couldn't be sure by how much, but the difference was undeniable. Arthur had just done something that most ninjas couldn't, pushed his body beyond its limits and then used a healing technique to not just repair but also enhance. Not a hint of happiness was seen in his expression. He was merely content to know how much this virtual world had underestimated him again. They had thrown him in a cell, hoping to break his spirit. Instead, they had given him a training ground that would forge him into the villain this world wouldn't expect. Arthur returned to his exercise. After several more sets he had to stop. His chakra had finally depleted. This strategy of growing was impeccable, to say the least, having never been done by anyone, but it did have its flaws. With no chakra to refuel his muscles, he had no choice but to rest. Sometime later, now renewed, he placed critical attention on learning a new technique, the substitution jutsu. It was a simple technique, one that allowed a ninja to instantly replace themselves with another object during an attack. Perhaps not flashy, but in the right hands, it would be incredibly effective. Perfect for a beginner like himself. Visualization was one of the keys to performing a technique. So he closed his eyes and pictured the hand signs from memory. There were 5 of them, a quick sequence that went from tiger to snake. It wasn't at all hard to remember since each of the hand signs correlated with the Chinese zodiac. And Arthur knew them all by heart. Muscles warmed up, mind focused, he began. Tiger, boar, ox, dog, and finally snake. His fingers danced across the air, each movement precise and deliberate. With the final hand sign, the chakra was ready to be channeled. Now came the test. He focused on the nearest thing he could link to his chain. Connection made, he inflicted pain on himself. There was a momentary distortion, a quick darkness, and then silence. He opened his eyes, triumph coursing through him. It had worked. He had successfully executed the substitution jutsu. With it, he could dodge attacks, create openings, and, most importantly, escape. But as he basked in the afterglow of his success, something dawned on him. He was no longer bound by the chains. The substitution jutsu had replaced him with a chain link, leaving him unbound in the center of the cell. He was free, but this isn't what he wanted. If a guard happened to glance in, they'd find him loose, an escape attempt. The punishment for such an offense would be swift and brutal. And there was a bigger problem, he couldn't reverse the jutsu. The chains also had locks on them. Even slipping back into them would be impossible. Cold sweat prickled his skin, but he remained calm. Panic wouldn't help him now. Based on his body's circadian rhythm, he estimated he had roughly 8 hours before the guard's next visit. 8 hours. Not ideal, but enough time to potentially rectify his situation. Instead of returning to the chains, he decided to use this slight freedom to his advantage. Hours passed by. He exercised, healing himself constantly until his chakra was low. If it wasn't for chakra, he wouldn't have had the stamina to train due to a lack of food. His mind wouldn't give heed to his body. Finally, a distant clang echoed through the corridor, interrupting his meditation. The guard. Arthur retained his position, slumping against the wall, his arms and legs strategically crossed over the chains. "A water," he said in a gruff voice. He kept his eyes closed, feigning a deeper state of exhaustion than he actually felt. A rough hand slammed a glass of water and a morsel of bread beside him. With a tone filled with cruel amusement, the guard said, "Tomorrow you'll be on your way to the Earth Country." Arthur hadn't expected that. Naruto's world operates on a system reminiscent of feudal Japan. Here, power is everything, and countries maintain a precarious balance through military might. Treaties are temporary at best, constantly threatened by the ever-present possibility of war. And each nation is ruled by a daimyo, or feudal lord in English, a monarch who holds ultimate political authority. Among these countries, 5 stand out for their immense power and influence: the land of fire, the land of wind, the land of earth, the land of mist, and the land of lightning. These 5 great shinobi countries are each home to a hidden village, a community dedicated to training and deploying highly skilled ninjas. These same ninjas act as military muscle for their respective countries, serving under the leadership of the village head while ultimately answering to the feudal lord. From what Arthur remembered, his role as clanless never stated where he would start. If he were in the land of fire, the most prominent nation in the world, housing all the protagonists, he would have no thoughts of leaving it yet. Mustering a weak voice, he rasped, "Where am I now?" The guard let out a chuckle, saying, "Still in the fire country, slave. Didn't think they'd send you across the border, but kids like you are worth the investment." There was a loud slick as the guard spat on the floor and closed the door. Arthur lay there, content with many things. He had made a mistake, a reckless one, but he had managed to salvage the situation. With more than 8 hours to train and hone his control, he would continue to use his setback as a stepping stone. Tomorrow is another day. And tomorrow, I'll be stronger. With predatory eyes, he pushed himself off the floor and slowly got into a handstand. What made it so impressive was that he was balancing on just 2 fingers. He began a series of push-ups, the blood rushing to his head. Every repetition, every second, was an opportunity to build his strength, refine his control, and refine himself. After some time, he collapsed onto the floor, covered in his own sweat. He had only been training for about 2 days, but because of his recover and repeat method, he'd managed to turn those 2 days into a 2-week training session, pushing his body and chakra control further than he thought possible. Now, however, exhaustion has set in again. His core signaled his depleted chakra reserves. As he lay there, his mind drifted to the other players trapped in this world. They had to have been here. Otherwise, the character selection slots wouldn't have been filled. Were they imprisoned like him? Suffering under the same oppressive regime? Empathy pricked his conscience. He might have envisioned himself as the villain, but his heart, shaped by his faith, still valued real people's lives. The teachings of his Christian upbringing hadn't at all clashed with his new persona. What he considered was whether the others felt the same. Perhaps he could liberate them, forge an alliance, and escape this cruel game. But one thing remained certain: he wouldn't be a pawn for anyone. He would be a player who would challenge any opposition that threatened to harm his existence. His actions, whatever they may be, will only be judged by God. Arthur pushed the disquieting thoughts about the other players to the back of his mind. He focused on another mystery: why he was here. Dr. Kapoor's assurances about a low pain threshold were a cruel joke. This was real, raw, agonizing pain that was not even mentioned in the documents he signed. There were no neatly displayed stats, no helpful tutorial prompts to guide him. He was adrift in a sea of uncertainty. Did Dr. Kapoor lie about death being real? Maybe it was a test, a way to prod him into playing their game seriously. That was far from the truth. A surge of anger coursed through him. They'd tricked him, manipulated him with promises of a harmless virtual experience. Now he was trapped as their guinea pig, his body a mere plaything for their twisted plot. The anger quickly subsided into something colder, sharper, a thirst for revenge. They had taken his freedom and subjected him to unimaginable pain, all in the name of science. He gritted his teeth at the thought. They would pay for this. When he would escape, Dr. Kapoor, or whoever else was behind it all, would all feel his fury. Arthur's eyes snapped open, gleaming with a newfound resolve. This wasn't just about conquering a virtual world anymore, this was about payback. The villain in the making was ready to collect his dues. The feeling of thirst settled in. Arthur didn't need a clock. His body kept a record of its needs, and thirst, this parched dryness, was its way of telling him it was close to dawn. This was the predictable hour when the guard would return with his meager ration of water. But today, things would be different. He rose from the floor, having spent the night not just resting but strategizing. The guard's unexpected lapse of vigilance regarding his chains had given him clarity on how to enact a foolhardy plan, one he was daring to try. Metal echoed down the corridor. Arthur steeled himself, forcing his body into a relaxed posture while his eyes closed in feigned sleep. He pictured his opponent, the guard from the previous day, as slow-witted. The clang of the cell door jolted him awake as a gruff voice said, "E up, scum. Time for your watery reward before we ship you off." Arthur feigned sluggishness. The guard opened his cell, unaware that the chains weren't on. This was it. Arthur carefully analyzed the guard's movements and telegraphed. What he needed was a moment of vulnerability. As the guard leaned in, his face inches away, Arthur saw his chance. With a burst of adrenaline, he lunged forward and aimed for the guard's chain. One sickening thud, and his fist connected cleanly. The guard grunted, more surprised than hurt. His eyes glazed over, confusion crossing his face. It wasn't enough. Arthur didn't hesitate. He threw all his weight behind a second blow, a sickening punch aimed at the guard's solar plexus. Bang! The impact sent a jolt of pain through his own hand, but it served its purpose. The guard finally doubled over. Arthur flexed his fists, ignoring the pain. Had it worked? Waiting for retaliation, none came. The guard crumbled to the floor unconscious. His attacks were successful. Anyone who was given a well-placed strike to their chin, a vital spot, could render that person unconscious. Arthur's own body, which had experienced a grueling training session, was hard enough to knock out grown men. He wasn't strong yet, but he had taken advantage of the opportunity against a less vigilant enemy. The weight of the situation kept him humbled. He couldn't afford to gloat. Escape was still paramount. He scrambled over the unconscious guard, fumbling the man's belt. Finally, his fingers brushed cool metal, a heavy keyring. He detached the ring and saw multiple keys. Sorting through them, he found the one that fit into the cell door's lock. It turned with a click, relief washing over him. But his freedom was a fragile thing. He quickly secured the guard's limbs with the chains that had bound him for far too long. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy him some time. Emerging from the cell, Arthur found himself in a dimly lit dungeon. He moved cautiously, his steps light and his senses on high alert. Every sound echoed in the unnatural silence. Before rounding any corner, he placed himself along the wall and waited. The corridors stretched before him like an unending tunnel. He needed to find an exit, a way back to whatever semblance of familiarity existed within this prison. Finally, a door broke the monotony of the corridor. He approached it cautiously. Inside, it looked like a medical unit. It was filled with syringes, bandages, for bags, and the lot. With furrowed brows, he moved on. Turning another corner, he heard the faint sound of someone's whimper. It drew him towards a different door. He peered inside and saw a woman huddled in the corner of the room. She had long brown hair, freckles, and was streaked with grime down her back. Most of her face was obscured, yet something about her sparked recognition. The woman flinched at the sound of the door opening, her eyes wide with terror. She cowered further into the corner, faintly saying, Please, don't hurt me again." Arthur remained impassive as he said, "I'm not a guard." He took a step closer, his eyes scanning the room for any potential threats. "Who are you?" The woman's gaze darted around the room. She scrutinized him carefully, her lips pursed in thought. Finally, she spoke with a trembling voice, "Please, help me." "Help you with what?" he countered, his voice firm. He needed information, not empty pleas. "Get me out of here? They keep taking me for tests. It hurts." Arthur's eyes narrowed. Tests? This seemed different from the treatment he'd received. Something was off, something he didn't understand. "Who are you?" he demanded. The woman hesitated, her eyes flitting nervously from him to the doorway as she stammered, "I am just a scientist." "The scientist?" Arthur repeated, skeptical. Scientists didn't cower in fear or beg for help. Yes, she insisted. They brought me here against my will. They're doing experiments. What's your name? I'm Yukimi. Suddenly he remembered who she was. Yukimi was a character in the story's filler arc. Her full name was Yukimi Iburi from the forgotten Iburi clan. She was ostracized for her weak smoke technique, a unique jutsu that allowed her and members of her clan to turn their bodies into natural smoke. Because of this jutsu, they were unable to go outside, lest they fully turned into smoke and died. Orochimaru, who was involved in this arc, offered her clan a solution, a cursed seal. When Leaf Ninjas Kakashi Hatake and Yamato trailed Orochimaru, they discovered the Iburi clan's secret location. Orochimaru, who was also fleeing the Leaf village at the time, sought to use Yukimi's blood to help cross the Fire Country's borders. Yukimi eventually discovered this, only to find that he had massacred her entire clan in order to gain their smoke transformation. His plan proved to be a failure since the only member whose blood was good enough for him to use was Yukimi herself. Devastated and unstable, she was saved by the aforementioned two ninjas and the spirits of her fallen clanmates. Her jutsu would then be stabilized, allowing her to be free to explore the world she had longed for. Arthur recalled all these events, which had taken place no more than 5 years ago. Yukimi wasn't at all a scientist. Or perhaps she was considering that her story ended without any explanations. A devious thought came to mind. This unexpected encounter wasn't a setback, it was an opportunity. This character could be used. "Await here," he ordered. He turned and exited the room, leaving her staring after him in a mix of fear and confusion. He backtracked, searching for the medical supply room. Once he found what he was looking for, he gathered the necessary supplies, bandage rolls, antiseptic solution, and the works. He then hurried back to Yukimi's cell, where the items were stored safely in a medical bag. When he returned, her eyes widened in surprise. "What are you doing?" she asked in suspicion. He ignored her question, unlocking the cell door with the key. Come on," he said. "We're leaving." Together they navigated the maze. They hadn't come across any guards or security checkpoints. Once they reached the end, they finally found an exit, a heavy metal door leading to the outside world. Arthur threw the door open, revealing a scene far removed from the dungeon halls. They stood in a remote clearing, bathed in the morning sun. Birds chirped in the surrounding forest, the complete opposite of what was inside the facility. He had always envisioned escape, but now was not the time to settle on scenery. He turned to Yukimi and said, "Follow me." Yukimi looked at him, unsure of herself. This child had freed her from a nightmare, but his motives remained shrouded. She was the one to ask for help. Surely, she wouldn't let go of the one who could ensure her survival. "All right, but where are we going?" she asked in a small but resolute tone. Arthur didn't answer. He simply turned and ran towards the dense trees, allowing Yukimi to follow. Yukimi was an unexpected addition, and he was going to use her. They plunged into the dense forest, the cool morning air a welcome change from their prison. Arthur led the way, pushing through the undergrowth. Yukimi followed close behind, her breath ragged, her eyes darting nervously at every rustle of leaves. He couldn't tell where he was going, but any place was better than here. After hours of running, exhaustion threatened to overwhelm Yukimi. The trees had thinned, revealing a sight that made her gasp. A small town nestled in a valley, smoke curling from chimneys, a picture of idyllic serenity. We made it," she breathed, sagging against a tree trunk. She was relieved, but Arthur knew better. In a cold voice, he said, "Not quite. Towns can be dangerous too. We can't just waltz in." Yukimi frowned, asking, "What do you mean?" "People live there. They can help us." He shook his head, responding, "Unless they're slave traders, I doubt it. A town this close to where our prison was would have a way of sniffing out outsiders, especially escapees like us." Yukimi's face blanched. Her mind raced, her initial relief turning to fear again. She had escaped one prison, only to find herself trapped in another. In a dreadful whisper constricting her throat, she asked, "So what do we do?" We stay hidden. For now at least." Scout the area, see if we can find anything or someone who might be of assistance. Yukimi didn't argue. She was too exhausted and too frightened to formulate a plan of her own. Arthur, however, had a strange sense of purpose, a cold logic that went against her instilled sliver of hope. He led her deeper into the woods, away from the town's tempting lights, until they found a secluded clearing. Arthur sat down with his back against a tree trunk, his gaze fixed on the distance. Yukimi watched him with a growing curiosity. He was an enigma. Suddenly he reached for her arm, his touch surprisingly gentle. Yukimi flinched instinctively, but before she could protest, he was already cleaning her wounds with the healing jutsu. "You're injured," he stated, more as an observation than a question. "The cuts and bruises. Nothing life-threatening." Yukimi stared at him, speechless, finally asking, "Daichao? How do you know how to do that? Are you a ninja?" Arthur finished healing the last of her wounds, his eyes cold and emotionless. She watched him, a thousand questions swirling in her mind. He had to be a ninja to perform medical ninjutsu. If he wasn't, one thing was for certain: this person had rescued her from her prison. As they sat in the quiet clearing, the weight of their situation finally settled on them. Pragmatically, Arthur decided it was time to gather information. "Where are you from?" he asked. "Honestly," she replied, her voice hesitant. "I don't have a home, not really. I was saved from something a while back and have been traveling ever since." Arthur knew what she might have been referring to, but he needed her to elaborate more. She stumbled, unsure how much to reveal to a stranger. But her gratitude for her freedom prompted her to continue. "I let my guard down. Slave traders. They discovered something about me, my Kekei Genkai. Then the experiment started. If it hadn't been for you," she trailed off with a grateful smile. Arthur watched her, now fully aware of what she had likely been through after her story finished. Yukimi wasn't a liar. Perhaps she truly had become a scientist before her imprisonment. This idea, however, wasn't in his interest. It was her Kekei Genkai. Kekei Genkai are special abilities passed down through generations in certain clans. These abilities come from genetic anomalies and manifest in different ways. They come in distinct types of Kekei Genkai. One type, like the Sharingan, grants the user unique eyes with special powers, such as seeing through objects or giving them incredible focus. Another type allows the user to combine basic elements like water and wind to create a new one, such as ice. Finally, some Kekei Genkai grant unique body manipulation abilities, such as freely controlling bones or absorbing natural energy. That was Yukimi Iburi's Kekei Genkai. These abilities make their wielders incredibly powerful but also ostracized. Feared for their deadliness, Kekei Genkai users are often persecuted or even hunted, despite their own village employing them. The abilities themselves are highly coveted, with some villages even attempting to steal or transplant them into others. Arthur knew full well what her clan's Kekei Genkai was. It allowed one to transform into pure smoke. However, this unnamed ability was far from perfect. Initially, they'd turn into smoke unintentionally or get stuck in that form. Orochimaru's cursed seal offered some stability, but they remained vulnerable to wind. Transforming while in smoke form meant they'd disperse permanently, which was fatal. Only Yukimi was able to overcome that setback. Arthur watched her, his face an unreadable mask. It all fits now. From the moment they escaped, he'd been wondering what he should do with her. Yukimi's story ended the moment she parted ways with Kakashi and Yamato. She was never heard from again. Sunlight dappled through the leaves and fell on Yukimi's face. She blinked it away with a smile, staying grateful for Arthur's help. He had not only saved her, he also healed her wounds. She looked down at her arm, whispering a silent thank you. Suddenly a shadow fell over her. She looked up, expecting to see his stoic face, but instead she saw a cold glint in his eyes. Before she could say any more, Arthur struck the back of her neck, the world spinning as her vision blurred at the edges. He watched her crumple to the ground unconscious. No regret was felt. Only his cold, calculating features remained, unflawed by the ruthless pragmatism that had already taken root in his mind. Naruto was an unfair world. Those who were strong were inevitably born into power. There was only one way to achieve that power: take it by force. A name surfaced in Arthur's mind, a character who had been merely a servant to one of the antagonists. Kabuto Yakushi, a side character, had become a significant asset. It was done through the art of cellular transfer. By absorbing the DNA of others, Kabuto gained their techniques and their Kekkei Genkai. Once this character acquired enough power, he was strong enough to start an entire war. Arthur wasn't Kabuto. He didn't possess the same techniques or scientific knowledge. But the core principle remained: DNA was power. And Yukimi, with her unique Kekkei Genkai and ability to transform her body into smoke, was a valuable resource. He kneeled beside her unconscious form, his medical tools in hand. This wasn't a decision he had taken lightly. But in this twisted world, kindness was a weakness, a luxury he couldn't afford. He focused on extracting specific tissues, the ones most likely to hold the essence of her Kekkei Genkai. Blood spewed across his hands and into 4 bags. He worked meticulously, his stomach churning with a primal mix of disgust and determination. This wasn't about sadism, it was about survival, about clawing his way to the top of this food chain. Hours later, the once pristine clearing was now a macabre tableau. It was long past dusk and the sunlight was seen in eerie twilight. As the last rays of the sun set, he finished. Arthur surveyed his handiwork. In his hand he held a vial filled with Yukimi's essence. She had inevitably died due to intense blood loss. Looking at the vial, he couldn't tell if it would work or not for this cellular transfer. For instance, if this virtual world's anatomical laws were the same as Earth's, then what if his blood type wasn't compatible? Regardless, he had to try. Securing the vial and 4 bags, he looked at Yukimi's lifeless body. It was all mangled and ripped apart. Arthur had never experienced this much blood on him or anyone before, yet his expression remained the same, still and unmoved. This world threatened to corrupt him, but he would never forget who he was inside. Using his bare hands, he dug a hole to store her body in and hide all the tools. It took several more hours, but it was worth hiding any evidence that she existed. Arthur left the clearing behind, moving to a secluded spot. Here, beneath the watchful gaze of the forest canopy, he would attempt the unthinkable, the transference of Yukimi's Kekkei Genkai. He laid out his tools, understanding the basic principles, introduce Yukimi's genetic material into his own system and hope that his body will accept it. If he failed, he would heal himself before any repercussions occurred. The first step involved creating a viable vector for the transfer. So he retrieved a syringe. This wasn't a sterile operating room, but he didn't have the patience to consider such things. He had to focus on the task in front of him. With a practiced hand, he drew the essence from the vial into the syringe and located a vein in the crook of his arm. This was going to be a delicate procedure. Introducing foreign genetic material directly into the bloodstream could trigger a violent immune response, with the body rejecting the alien cells. He needed a way to bypass this initial hurdle, a way to trick his body into accepting the new genetic code. The healing technique was the only way to do it from a non-scientific point of view. All he had to do was suppress rejection during the transplant. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. He centered his chakra, channeling it through the syringe and into the vial. The cells inside circulated violently, providing a visual confirmation of his success. Now came the decisive moment. Without hesitating, he plunged the needle into his vein, the sensation burning like wildfire. He pushed the modified genetic cocktail into his system, saying a silent prayer, "Thus saith the Lord's grace is sufficient for me, for the Lord's strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly therefore will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Suddenly his vision swam, his muscles spasmed, and the pain spread through his whole body. He collapsed onto the forest floor, convulsing. Trying to heal himself and maintain the cellular transfer at the same time was not within his control. Arthur gritted his teeth, channeling every ounce of his will into forcing his chakra to flow to suppress the rising tide of rejection. The pain was excruciating. Time seemed to lose all meaning. Minutes felt like they were stretched into agonizing hours as he fought for control. Finally, as abruptly as it began, the pain slowly subsided. He lay gasping on the forest floor, sweat drenching his clothes, his body trembling with exhaustion. He could now feel the essence circulating perfectly into his bone marrow, merging with new red blood cells. He flexed his hand, feeling a residual chakra lingering within him. This was it. This was Yukimi's chakra pool, and it is now inside him. With more time, it would integrate until his body could fully utilize her Kekkai Genkai. While walking back cautiously to the nearby town, Arthur considered how fortunate he was to have stumbled across a Kekkai Genkai user. Characters like Yukimi were not a common find. Perhaps by chance, her story was developed by Elysium's artificial intelligence systems, allowing him to cross paths. Or perhaps the programs knew he would tread on this path of darkness, placing her in the same situation as him. Regardless, he knew that the hardware functions of the world couldn't be altered. The moment he entered the pod, everything was static, only changeable by the player's choices. Putting those thoughts aside, he knew what he needed: more Kekkai Genkai. They were very unique, with only a few being effective in combat. The smoke Kekkai Genkai, for instance, can deceive a prominent ninja's senses. This was shown when Kakashi, a user of the Sharingan, fought Yukimi's clanmates and couldn't differentiate them from real smoke. Other Kekkai Genkai could form hardened crystals, absorb chakra, explode objects on contact, and even generate their own magnetic force. But out of all the Kekkai Genkai in this world, only one surpassed them all: the Rinnegan. Arthur didn't want to think further about that ocular technique. With each passing hour, his body had fully accumulated all the foreign cells. He approached the town he'd previously avoided, keeping a safe distance. Citizens could be heard rustling about. Arthur couldn't help but feel the bitter taste of their normalcy. He closed his eyes, focusing on his chakra. Channeling it, his body became weightless until it dissolved entirely. He was smoke, a formless cloud drifting in the breeze. It was exhilarating, a newfound freedom of movement, but he didn't let the excitement get to him. He drifted through the air, swirling around buildings, testing the limits of his control. It wasn't perfect, tendrils of smoke occasionally strayed from the main body, but with each passing moment, his perfection in it steadily grew. Passing over rooftops and peering into windows, he monitored the unsuspecting townspeople. They were average citizens, oblivious to his presence. He saw families gathered around dinner tables, couples walking along the street, and children sleeping in their beds. Nothing was needed to remind him that they were mere virtual characters. What he needed were resources and information. In a house on the outskirts of town, he found his answer. This, Arthur decided, was a safe target. He seeped through a crack in the window and scanned the whole home. No one was inside. Reforming himself inside the house, he quickly scanned the living room, finding a map sprawled across a table and a worn leather satchel overflowing with weapons. This house belonged to a ninja. He focused on the map, its faded ink depicting the surrounding area with a surprising level of detail. This would be invaluable. Shifting his attention to the satchel, he accessed its contents and found scrolls, throwing knives, shuriken, and an assortment of other weapons inside hidden compartments. He gathered everything he could and made his way to the kitchen. The smell of leftover meals permeated his nostrils. It had been days since he had any real food. Finding fruits and vegetables, he ate them with caution, aware that his mind was only thinking it was real food. It tasted good. This wasn't about playing fair, this was about survival, about rising above the limitations placed upon him. Arthur stored some food in his satchel and reformed into smoke. A truly advantageous Kekkai Genkai for allowing him to turn whatever object on his person into smoke as well. He drifted back out the window, the map clutched in his smoky form. Leaving the town behind, he materialized back in the forest, the tools strapped to his side. He then unfurled the map, tracing the lines with a finger. On the front, the map focused on the 5 major countries: Land of Fire, Land of Wind, Land of Lightning, Land of Earth, and Land of Mist. Each ruled by a feudal lord, these equally powerful nations are scattered across a continent to maintain balance. Like Arthur remembered, they were named after their dominant chakra nature, each housing a powerful hidden village led by a Kage. Despite past rivalries, these countries were said to have come together to form the Shinobi Union after the Fourth War. What interested Arthur, however, was the Land of Fire and its hidden village, the Leaf Village. Despite not being on the map, he knew exactly where both he and it were. The town he came from wasn't anything special. It surrounded other towns with pedestrians and merchants. The road ahead was long and fraught with danger. But he knew better than to tread in enemy territory. Would they open the gate for him? Would they even let him casually cross through their barrier? Knowing it wouldn't be so simple, he set off to the nearest body of water. The relentless march through the woods had left Arthur coated in grime and sweat until he stumbled upon a clear, running river. Memories of childhood camping trips and splashing around in cool mountain streams with his family surfaced. He pushed them down, knowing this wasn't some idyllic vacation. He stripped off his tunic and trousers and stepped into the river. The water was cold, a shock to his system, but it was also refreshing. He submerged himself, letting the current wash away the grime and the lingering scent of blood. Exiting, he scrubbed his clothes against a smooth rock and rinsed them thoroughly before draping them across a branch to dry. He only had his undergarments on, but any sense of shamefulness was quickly eclipsed by a desire to hone his skills. He wouldn't survive long relying solely on smoke jutsu. He needed knowledge to use weapons effectively. Ninjas could throw their arsenal of tools with deadly precision, and he had to be ready. Rummaging through the satchel, he pulled out a selection of throwing knives and shuriken. They felt surprisingly light in his hands. Finding a large, flat rock nestled amongst the trees, he designated it as his target. Throwing an object required balance, using his entire body, not just his arm. The first few attempts were disastrous, with the blades clattering harmlessly to the ground at the rock's foot. He was hitting his target, but that wasn't his goal. What he needed to do was lodge the knife into the rock. With each throw, a sense of muscle memory kicked in. He adjusted his grip, shifted his weight, and focused on a precise throw. The next knife flew true, embedding itself with a satisfying thunk into the center of the rock. Satisfying, but still not perfect. He continued practicing, the frustration of early misses giving way to a growing sense of accomplishment. His throws became more consistent, and the blades found their mark with increasing accuracy. When he became tired, he used the healing jutsu to restart. Next was shuriken. Shuriken were ninja stars, demanding a slightly different throwing technique. He practiced relentlessly, sweat beading on his brow and the muscles in his arms burning with exertion. The sun began to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and purple. Still, he continued, driven by a relentless need to improve. As darkness finally descended, he remained still on the forest floor, his body not at all exhausted thanks to the healing jutsu. He had a long way to go, but he was increasing steadily. The next thing he did was move on to chakra control. Control was paramount. Now that he had accumulated Yukimi's chakra pool, it was essential that he balance it. The process was simple, taking no more than a few minutes. Once he finished that, he trained channeling his chakra externally. Known as a chakra flow, the user can circulate their chakra through an object or their body to enhance its capabilities. When directed through weapons, chakra can increase sharpness, durability, or add elemental effects like fire or lightning. Flowing chakra through the body can also improve physical attributes like speed, defense, or even create a protective shield. The exact effects depend on the type and amount of chakra used. Arthur closed his eyes, focusing inward. He felt the chakra within him, picturing it flowing through his body like a warm current coursing through his veins. When he finished, he picked up a throwing knife and concentrated his chakra on the metal. He envisioned enhancing the blade itself before gripping the handle and throwing it with all his might. It met a weathered tree trunk with a dull thud. The knife stuck harmlessly. A good throw, but not at all what he was expecting. He closed his eyes again, this time picturing the chakra as a muscle rather than a flowing current. He imagined stretching it, pushing it beyond its perceived limits. With each attempt, the strain grew, and the chakra protested the unfamiliar exertion. It took several hours before a breakthrough. The chakra responded, expanding outward. He grabbed another throwing knife, confident in his grip. This time, channeling the chakra, he focused on enhancing the blade's sharpness rather than its power. He pictured it piercing through the tree with ease, the tip imbued with his chakra. When he threw it, the knife shot out of his hand. It met the tree trunk with a resounding clang. When he approached it, only the handle protruded. He had done it. He had successfully channeled his chakra into the weapon, augmenting its capabilities. This wasn't an easy feat, as it could help pave the way to new possibilities. Exhaustion settled upon Arthur. He pushed himself through one last routine, a punishing series of push-ups and lunges designed to test his endurance. His muscles burned, and his breath rasped in his throat, but he pushed on, fueled to get stronger. Finally, collapsing onto the forest floor, he allowed himself a moment of respite. The cool night air carried the scent of damp earth and pine needles. It felt oddly comforting compared to his time in prison. With a grunt, he rose and made his way back to the river. Cold water once washed away the grime and sweat on his body. He donned his clothes, now dried, and settled himself comfortably beneath a large oak tree. The canopy of leaves provided a shield against the moon's light. The night noises of the forest were like a familiar lullaby. He was far from home, far from the life he once knew, but he was no longer afraid. Sleep came easily. When he awoke, he saw the first rays of dawn. Hunger pounded his stomach, so he reached into his satchel and retrieved some rice cake and dried fruit. They held little appeal, but they were sustenance nonetheless. As he ate, he considered what crucial skill he had to perfect next. His current techniques consisted of the smoke jutsu, the healing jutsu, and the substitution jutsu. There was also his innate chakra control. Solid for a starting shinobi, but not impressive in the slightest. Ninjas around his age, some younger, had a list of jutsu in their arsenal. Like Itachi Uchiha, Sasuke's older brother, he could create authentic clones and manipulate fire as if it were his dance partner. Or Kakashi Hatake, who could conduct lightning to his palm. What Arthur found paramount was to enhance his strength, create impenetrable defenses, and achieve lightning-fast reflexes. He arose, closing his eyes. The chakra within him had fully recovered. Rather than focusing on flowing outwards this time, he concentrated on it flowing inwards. The chakra coursed through his muscles, invigorating them. He tensed, willing the chakra to enhance his physical capabilities. The first few attempts were met with frustration. Nothing seemed to change. He felt no surge of power, no increase in strength. But Arthur was not one to give up easily. He remained calm and pushed himself further. With each failed attempt, he learned, adjusting his focus and refining his technique. Finally, a change. A subtle shift, almost imperceptible at first, but real nonetheless. He felt more energy pouring through him, his muscle cells buzzing. He flexed his arm, a sensation unlike anything he'd experienced before. It wasn't just strength, it was also a heightened awareness, a sense of control over his own body. He punched the air, feeling the force travel through his arm, the impact resonating through the very air itself. Finding a rock, he picked it up and slightly squeezed. The rock burst into smaller pieces. Before he could feel content, the chakra dissipated, and his strength faded. It was short-lived, but it was a start. And based on what he felt, he knew he could make it last if he practiced more. This technique was known as chakra-enhanced strength. It's listed as a taijutsu skill, but it implements chakra into one's arms or feet, releasing it with precise timing to achieve super strength, classifying as a support technique. Notable characters like Sakura Haruno, Tsunade, and Hashirama were capable of this feat. Theirs, however, was incomparable to Arthur's. While they could throw boulders 3 times their size hundreds of meters out, he still needed proper refinement to reach those limits. With a dehumph, he picked up another rock and began his training. 2 days later, Arthur rose, feeling no aches or pain after his training regimen. Every moment, he pushed himself to his limits, and his body would recover immediately. He was thriving. Yesterday, he learned to walk on vertical surfaces and acquired 2 fundamental skills: transformation jutsu and high-speed movement. The former allowed him to disguise himself as another character, an animal, or an object, gaining their physical features. While useful, its main purpose is for combat deception and intel gathering. The slightest imperfection could keep him away. The latter, also known as the body flicker technique, allowed him to zip across short or long distances so fast that he appeared to teleport. By channeling chakra, he can temporarily boost his movements to extreme speeds. The amount of chakra needed varies depending on how far and uphill they're going. Smoke bombs are often used to mask their movements, but other materials work too, like sand, mist, and leaves. Thanks to Arthur having remembered the hand signs, practicing them was easy. But it wasn't anything worth praising since they were both gear-rank techniques. In this world, techniques are classified based on their difficulty and required skill level. This is known as an alphabet ranking system to help assess a ninja's overall abilities. Starting with the most basic rank, E rank, techniques that fall in this rank are learned by academy students or trainees starting their ninja journey. They are the foundational building blocks for more advanced jutsu. Next is D rank. These techniques are within the grasp of the most active ninjas. However, some ninjas may specialize in a specific type and only perfect those techniques within this rank. Following D rank is C rank. These techniques are considered appropriate for intermediate ninjas. While some highly trained ninjas might learn C rank techniques, they are generally more challenging to perfect than the lower ranked ones. Next is B rank. Techniques in this rank require a high level of chakra control, typically performed by elite ninjas. They can be quite powerful and often demand significant chakra reserves. A rank is reserved for even higher skilled ninjas, to the point where a Kage uses them. These techniques require exceptional chakra control and might even be forbidden due to their extreme nature or potential dangers. Lastly is the secret S rank, incredibly powerful techniques unique to a single user or a small group. They represent the pinnacle of jutsu perfection and are often considered catastrophically dangerous or difficult to control. It's important to note that Kekkei Genkai and unique abilities don't typically fall under this ranking system. They are inherent traits or learned skills that can be incredibly powerful but aren't categorized based on difficulty in the same way as jutsus. Classifications are not the end of things. The ninja villages are like military organizations with a clear hierarchy. At the top is the Kage, the leader, who makes decisions with advisors. Below them are the regular forces, the umbu or secret operatives, and the medical teams. The regular forces serve as the village's backbone. Ninja progresses through the ranks from academy student to genin, chunin, and jonin. Jonin are the elite of the ninja world. Highly skilled and experienced, they're considered almost superhuman and can often use multiple elemental chakra natures, typically taking on high-risk missions alone. They may also lead and train genin teams, passing on their knowledge and deciding when their students are ready for the next level. The most well-recognized jonin worth mentioning are those from the Leaf Village, Asuma Sarutobi, Kurenai Yuhi, and Kakashi Hataki, the leader of the main character's genin team. Genin are often put in three-person squads with a jonin leader to learn the ropes. These teams can stick together even as members rise in rank. Following a jonin are umbu, a special task force of elite ninjas who handle sensitive missions for their Kage. They may have different groups for tasks like hunting missing ninjas, interrogation, or even assassination. The last of the forces within a village are medical teams, the support crew who heal the injured through medical techniques. Some medical ninjas deploy squads as field medics, whereas others work in village hospitals. All of this was what Arthur had learned. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, he finally deemed it necessary to move elsewhere. He had a long road ahead of him. It was time to head to the hidden Leaf Village. Arthur didn't know much about the Leaf Village. He knew it was one of the 5 most powerful ninja villages led by the Hokage. It is nestled deep in a forest, surrounded by walls, and its signature landmark is the Hokage Rock, engraved with the faces of all the past Hokages. The village was founded by Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha to bring peace after years of warring clans. Hashirama, the first Hokage, used his special wood powers to build much of the village's infrastructure. The residential districts are where ninjas, non-ninjas, and their families live. There are also multiple training grounds for others to hone their skills. The academy is a building dedicated to training future ninja and is where the Hokage's office resides. Hospitals, administrative buildings, and restaurants are all located inside, all surrounded by enormous walls to focus on their citizens' security. While nestled deep within a forest, it blends in with the surrounding nature. And as an extra layer of protection, a giant, invisible, dome-shaped barrier resides over the forest. Any unauthorized person coming in or out of the barrier can be detected and pinpointed instantly. Arthur had every reason to go to the Leaf Village. He had already been in this world for about a week and a half, so he believed. If Dr. Kapoor hadn't lied, that would mean that the main character's ascent to a genin would happen soon, thus cementing the start of the story. On top of this, he hadn't contacted any of the other players. They alone were enough reasons to at least pay a visit. The crisp morning air nipped at him as he set off, the map clutched tightly in his hand. Though the village itself wasn't marked on this map, his memory sufficed, knowing where it was likely located. It was his only lead, so he knew the journey would be arduous. A couple days passed, measured by the rising and setting sun. His food rations had dwindled, replaced by berries and scavenged scraps. He was getting hungry. He wouldn't let hunger deter him, so he pushed onward. As the sun began to set again, he emerged from a dense thicket of trees into a clearing. A dirt road stretched before him, disappearing into the distance. Two figures stood in the middle, blocking his path. They were large men, clad in mismatched leather armor and wielding an assortment of crude weapons, a rusty axe, a dented sword, and a club wrapped in barbed wire. They weren't ninjas, at least not in the traditional sense. Rather, they looked like petty thugs. Arthur paused, his gaze sweeping over the scene. Their bags bulged with what appeared to be stolen goods. As they neared him, he said, "I hold. Identify yourselves." The two bandits exchanged a look of amusement. Unscoffed, "Identify ourselves? What kind of game are you playing, kid?" When Arthur hadn't answered, their amusement faded, replaced by annoyance. The other bandit, a tall, burly man with a missing tooth, hefted his club menacingly. "You got a problem, pal?" he snarled, taking a menacing step forward. He was clearly twice the size of Arthur. But Arthur didn't back down. He met the bandit's gaze, his own eyes devoid of fear. He had faced worse. These thugs were nothing more than a nuisance. "I'll say it again, identify yourselves," he replied, his voice steady. The bandits exchanged another look, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, the first bandit sneered, "Look here, little boy, we don't appreciate being questioned like that. Now, if you know what's good for you, you'll turn around and keep walking." Negotiation was clearly futile. These men weren't interested in reason, they understood only the language of force. With a quick hand sign, Arthur performed the high-speed movement technique. He was upon them before they could react. The first bandit, caught off guard, barely raised his axe before Arthur slammed a chakra-enhanced fist into his chest. Bang! The impact sent him sprawling backward. The second bandit, however, reacted with a roar, swinging his club wildly. Arthur sidestepped the clumsy attack. He grabbed the bandit's wrist with one hand, his augmented muscles holding on like a vice. "Let go," the bandit bellowed, struggling against Arthur's grip. Arthur ignored him, focusing on his own chakra control. The bandit swung his club again, this time connecting with a sickening thud. But when the bandit looked, his entire weapon had been stopped by Arthur's forearm. A scream of pain ripped from the bandit's throat as his arm buckled. Arthur didn't hesitate. With a swift kick, he sent him sprawling onto the dirt road, whimpering in pain next to his unconscious comrade. The entire fight had taken only a few seconds. Arthur stood tall, his chest heaving slightly, his gaze fixed on the two groaning figures at his feet. The surprise attack, fueled by his enhanced movements, was the key to his victory. These men, bandits by trade, lacked the honed reflexes and preemptive awareness of trained ninjas. They relied on brute force, which could be countered with a strategic combination of speed and power. It wasn't that he was strong, they were simply too weak. The bandits, disoriented and wounded, posed no further threat. Yet Arthur knew the dangers of underestimating his opponents. He reached into his satchel, knowing what had to be done. With practiced precision, honed over days of relentless training, he threw two knives in quick succession. Each one found its mark, one knife embedding itself between the first bandit's eyes. The other found its mark similarly, lodged in the center of the second bandit's forehead. Both had died. Arthur hadn't planned on killing them. Ideally, he was testing himself, preparing for the evil he would deliver to everyone who stood in his path. In this unforgiving world, hesitation was a luxury he couldn't afford. He wasn't at all a sadist, but he was a cold pragmatist. He rummaged through the bandits' bags. What he found was exactly what he needed: food rations, a canteen filled with water, clothes of various sizes, and money. Unlike when he started off with nothing, now he had 400 ryo and an extra set of clothes. Arthur kneeled beside the first bandit, removing his throwing knife. The man's face wasn't familiar. No resemblance to any notable characters. Gathering their bodies and belongings, he set about burying them. It was a grim task, but he managed to dig a hole deep enough to deter scavengers and wild animals. He threw them inside with all the items, including his own, filling the hole with his bare hands. After finishing, he turned his attention to the new set of clothes. They were a tad dusty, but they were his size, a sleek kimono with subtle blue trimmings and matching sandals ninjas typically wore. It wasn't the flashiest attire, but it was certainly more practical than his ragged shirt and trousers. He slipped into the new clothes feeling content. Some time later, the Leaf Village came into view. It was a towering wall, but something wasn't right. He should have been stopped after entering the village's barrier. Yet he'd walked straight through without a hitch. Why hadn't the barrier been activated? He could only think of two reasons: it was inactive or his chakra signature was already registered in the village, making him a welcomed citizen. He pressed onward, the village gates looming closer. Two figures clad in familiar green flak jackets stood guard. Arthur recognized them, Kotetsu Hagane and Izumo Kamizuki, the ever-present gate guards. They were minor characters, having only proved their worth in the second part of the story. As he approached, the guards straightened, their postures turning alert. Kotetsu, a man with a strip of bandage running across the bridge of his nose, spoke first. "Halt! You need to identify yourself before we let you in." Arthur needed to be this careful, so he announced, "Arthur Bennett." Silence followed. Kotetsu exchanged looks with Izumo. "Arthur Bennett? You've been missing for over a week. Where have you been?" Now Arthur understood. Dr. Kapoor hadn't lied when she said there was a surprise about their characters. And like all the descriptions of each character, their backgrounds were already programmed. Arthur, coming up with a believable excuse, said, "Lost. I got lost in the woods for days. I can't tell you how I ended up so far from the village." The answer wasn't perfect, but it would have to do. He kept his gaze fixed on the guards, avoiding any mention of the barrier or the strange circumstances of his arrival. He'd already discarded the satchel along with most of the other items, anything that could potentially expose what he's been through. Kotetsu and Izumo looked a tad skeptical. They clearly weren't convinced, but Arthur held his ground, his expression resolute, saying, "Thankfully, I came across a river and cooked fish out in the wild." The tension eased a little. They informed him that they'd file a report on his return, and the entire thing was a misunderstanding. Stepping aside, they allowed him to enter the village. This was it, but something felt amidst. The character known as Arthur had a background that he wasn't completely aware of. Surely, he would do some research on the matter once he navigated this unfamiliar landscape. What was in front of him mattered more: the Hidden Leaf Village, a place of ninjas and camaraderie. It was just one of many steps towards unraveling the mystery and exacting his revenge. Inside, everything was programmed to perfection. The Leaf Village had many twisting alleys lined with quaint shops and towering wooden houses. Children chased each other with joyous shrieks and laughter, while villagers bustled about their daily tasks with cheerfulness. Nausea filled Arthur's insides. It was all so artificial. The perfect smiles, the choreographed movements, it all felt like a meticulously crafted theme park, a cheap imitation of life. These people, these villagers, he vaguely recalled, weren't living, they existed within a simulation. Their happiness, their very existence, was for the sick amusement of others. No one in particular looked familiar. And the question still needed to be answered: where were the other players? He ignored greetings from the villagers, their smiles feeling like painted masks. Instead, he decided to explore, to try and understand the scope of Elysium's creation. The first landmark that caught his eye was the academy. While most would have a sense of nostalgia, it evoked a cold dread within Arthur. These were young children honing weapons that would eventually die in war. Across the street was a dango shop. The aroma of sweet dumplings wafted through the air. His mouth would have salivated had he not known better. Pausing for a moment, he watched obese families with their kids devour their treats. Further down the street, something new caught his eye: a building with painted posters plastered across the front. Intrigued, he approached. It was an authentic theater, and there were LED lights flashing inside, indicating a movie was playing. One of the posters showed a beautiful woman, and her name was Princess Fun. Arthur had never seen or heard of this woman. Little did he know this was the main character in the first Naruto movie. The village itself was dotted with small parks, each maintained with flowers and babbling fountains. Children played with innocent laughter under the watchful gaze of their parents. He felt angry for he knew that this was all a lie. Past the parks, he spotted a vast training ground. Figures sparred and practiced intricate techniques, none of whom were recognizable. Their movements were crisp, unlike the foes he's fought before. His next journey led him to a familiar building, the Jonin standby station. Elite ninjas stood gathered outside. They exchanged conversations, preparing for missions. Only one of them piqued Arthur's interest, Asuma Sarutobi. This character is the son of the third Hokage Hiruzen Sarutobi. Known to use wind techniques and trench knives, he would eventually die in 3 years from a deadly group of ninjas. Arthur continued his walk, passing a library with towering shelves. Next, a pristine hospital came into view, its windows filled with moving shadows. Further along, he saw steam rise from a cluster of buildings, the hot springs, a place where a lot of perverted scenes occurred. Past all those sights, a variety of restaurants lining the main street were seen. Taiyaki stalls, yakitori vendors, and ramen shops, every famous Japanese dish was present inside. To his surprise, neither Naruto Uzumaki nor Choji Akimichi were here, the latter was a glutton who loved to eat. Finally, Arthur reached the most iconic landmark, the Hokage Rock. An entire day had passed just for him to reach here. The faces of past Hokages, carved in stone, stared down at the village. It was a monument to their history, yet it seemed like a cruel joke. From left to right, he saw Hashirama Senju, the younger brother, Tobirama Senju, their pupil, Hiruzen Sarutobi, and then Naruto's father, Minato Namikaze. While Hiruzen might have returned to being the Hokage after Minato's death, he was written to have died at the hands of Orochimaru, his own pupil, a few months from now. Arthur ascended the mountain path. The cheerful shouts and the clatter of market stalls grew distant the higher he went up. With each step, a panoramic view of the village unfolded beneath him. Yet the beauty of the scene did little to appease his thoughts. He had seen it all, the crafted streets, the giant kanji letter for fire on the Hokage's office, they were all illusions of a bustling society filled with armed ninjas. He reached the mountain peak, standing over the heads of one of the Kage as the wind whipped at his kimono. Below, the village seemed endless, but Arthur remained unfazed. His mind would never change. He wouldn't be swayed by this facade. He wouldn't be lulled into a false sense of security by these simulated cheers. He knew the truth, a cold, hard truth that burned brighter than the replicated sun in this virtual sky. A sudden warm voice cut through the wind. Arthur? He slowly spun around and saw a figure standing a few feet apart. It was Jada Schmidt. Her virtual character was younger than the woman he knew, exuding youthful exuberance. Her blonde hair was now black, cascading down her shoulders as she stood bathed in the setting sun's golden glow. Before he could react, she rushed and hugged him, saying, "There you are. We've been looking all over for you. Where have you been?" The embrace felt foreign. He forced a fake smile, the gesture feeling unnatural. In a calm tone, he said, "I was exploring." Jada pulled back slightly, surprised at his touch as she said, "You feel like ice. Did you fall into a stream or something?" He shook his head, averting his gaze from her searching eyes. Everything based on her action pointed to cheerfulness and a genuine worry for his safety. "I'm fine," he said. "Just a little cold." She tilted her head while keeping her gaze fixed on him. In a concerned tone, she asked, "That still doesn't answer my question. Where have you been?" He wanted to tell her everything, to spill his guts about what he'd been through. But logic restrained him. He couldn't tell if this was truly Jada or another programmed character. Sharing what he knew could put him in danger. I was lost in the forest for about a week," he confessed, "but I managed to find the village and in turn, you found me. Aren't you glad?" The question jolted all of her sense of reason. She smiled and said, "Are you kidding? I'm super happy. You must have had a crazy tutorial." Too many things were learned from their simple conversation. The first is that she said I implying the other players were also wondering where he was. Then she said tutorial. No NPC, unless highly intelligent, would say that. Jada grabbed his hand, her grasp warm to the touch, and said, "Come on, you look hungry. Let's get back down to the village." He allowed her to pull him along the familiar path leading down the mountain. As they descended, she chattered about her day, recounting a training exercise with the group. Her voice was filled with the same soft, youthful enthusiasm he remembered from the real world. There was no doubt about it, she hadn't at all experienced his trials. He listened with half an ear as he tried to piece things together. Was she truly ignorant of the prison they were trapped in, or was this really an NPC? She couldn't have been, for she listed all the participating players. The descent felt agonizingly slow. Each passing moment fed his growing paranoia. He couldn't trust the person guiding him. He needed to find a way to test her to see if she wasn't part of Dr. Kapoor's plot. Ajada, he interjected. Yeah, she responded, a questioning look in her eyes. Do you remember one of the flaws I said about this world? Jada's smile faltered. Confusion crossed her features as she repeated, flaws? She seemed uncertain. Well, I can't recall, but I think I remember you saying something about technology not making sense here. Why do you ask? Arthur's heart pounded. Her answer was exactly what he'd hoped for. Jada was the real deal, a player like himself. He quickly schooled his expression into a mask of nonchalance, shrugging, just curious. I was wondering if maybe there was something you might have seen. Jada gave a genuine smile, chirping, yeah, actually. Did you know they had a movie theater built like we were in the 2000s? Arthur played along with her enthusiasm. As long as she wasn't a programmed character, that's what truly mattered. They continued their descent. Jada chattered excitedly about the village, pointing out landmarks. By chance, she had wanted to see the Hokage rock up close, and she happened to spot him on the mountain. Though she and the other players were present, his original goal of vengeance remained. He still desired to free everyone. As they neared a few residential homes, she finally stopped with a concerned look. Arthur, she began in a soft voice, before we greet the others, are you sure you're okay? There's a lot to take in, including meeting everyone and getting used to our roles here. Also, you've been a little quiet. I'm sorry if I haven't been considerate. He looked at her with a well-acted, genuine smile and said, don't worry about me, Jada, I'm a quick learner. Besides, with you by my side now, how can anything bad happen? Without meaning to, he made her blush. She giggled, saying, you're such a charmer. The two took an elevator up to the highest level, walking to the first of the only two ornately decorated doors on the floor. Jada pushed the first open, ushering Arthur into a spacious apartment. Here, the floors were made of sleek marble and had plush rugs. The windows offered a breathtaking panoramic view of the village, with sunlight bathing the room in a warm orange glow. This is where the players were living? Arthur hid his unease. Inside, William, Margaret, and Alice were spread out comfortably, chatter filling the living room. These weren't the people he remembered. William now sported dark red hair and no longer had his usual trim beard. He still wore his trademark glasses, which gave him a more youthful appearance. At the end of the day, he still looked like a nerd. Margaret's appearance hadn't changed much. Her dyed hair remained the same and her personality matched its hotness. Alice's once brunette locks were now a vibrant blonde. Where are Jasper and Alexander? As he thought this, he heard from behind, do my eyes deceive me? Walking across the platform was them. Alex, with the biggest grin, said, I to think we'd be seeing this handsome gent. Alex hadn't changed at all, save for his youthful appearance. Regarding Jasper, he now had inexplicably white hair. All the players were younger, and their physical appearances molded to fit the virtual characters they'd chosen. The sudden arrival caused a stunned silence to fall over the scene. All eyes turned towards Arthur, many of whom were either surprised or elated. Arthur! William exclaimed, pushing himself to his feet. You finally made it. Arthur plastered on a smile, casually waving, hey everyone, glad to see you're doing well. Margaret snorted, doing well? More like doing nothing. She didn't at all seem surprised at his arrival. Instead, she kicked back on the couch. I'm so bored. Alex and Jasper moved inside, with Jasper giving Arthur a curt smile before quickly turning uninterested. Chuckling, Alex apologized for his rude behavior. Arthur chuckled back, pretending not to mind. These were the people he was trying to get to side with him, yet they seemed oblivious to the situation they were in. He needed to continue playing along. All right then, he said in a light tone. How about we catch up? "This I gotta hear," Alice said, gesturing to the empty space beside her. He glanced around the room once more, eyeing a prominent item on their person, the Leaf Village headband. Only those who graduated from the academy were permitted to wear one, signifying their official role as a ninja. On Alex, his headband was wrapped around his waist. On Jasper, it was strapped tightly to his left bicep. Alice and Margaret had theirs in the same spot, around their necks. William was the only one to wear it on his forehead. As for Jada, it wasn't showing anywhere. They each huddled together on the two couches, with Jasper choosing to sit in the kitchen with his elbows resting on the counter. "I guess I'll start," Arthur announced. It didn't take long for him to tell a quick story about how he arrived alone somewhere in the Fire Country. The fact that he killed an NPC, was lied to, sent to prison, and acquired a Kekiai Genkai through unethical means was all hidden. "I knew clanless was stupid," and Margaret cried. "Oh, come on," Alex argued. Arthur was able to spend time outside the village and look at his cool clothes. Jasper furrowed his brows, eyeing Arthur as if trying to find a flaw. There hadn't been a single scratch on Arthur's body whatsoever, so he asked, "What were you doing all that time?" "Living off the land," Arthur replied. "You're probably wondering why I look so clean, huh? I washed my clothes in the river. Don't get me wrong, I was freezing." The others laughed, feeling only a little sorry that he got the short end of the stick. He wasn't going to reveal the whole truth to them. Not yet. They all bought his tale, knowing full well what the clanless description had stated. Comment. Zero comment. Vote. Chapter 11, Convenient. "So, tell me about you guys." "I guess I'll start first," William said, sheepishly raising his hand. "I chose to be an uzumaki." He explained that because he was the first to arrive at Elysium, he got to choose before anyone else. The decision was hard on him at first, but he inevitably went with uzumaki. Seemingly endless supply of chakra, plus a free sealing technique, good choice, Arthur thought. But he's hiding something. Margaret rolled her eyes and scoffed, "Yo, please. You just wanted to get closer to Naruto." William adjusted his glasses, saying, "There's that too. I mean, befriending the Naruto Uzumaki? That's a dream come true." Now Arthur understood what he was hiding. He was a wannabe fanboy. Margaret stood up from the couch and continued to boast, "Honestly, the two of you should have chosen the Senju clan. Who cares if it was a 50-50 chance? Come on. Regeneration and with style? It's a no-brainer." Alex chuckled, "Hey, don't knock the other clans." Arthur could already tell what everyone had chosen at this point. Their new hairstyles had given it away at first, but hearing Margaret's outburst told him she had chosen to be a Senju. But he needed to learn more. "What sealing jutsu did you choose?" he asked. He picked Six Paths Planetary Devastation," Jasper answered for him. This was undoubtedly the strongest sealing technique in this world, and it required the combined powers of two extremely powerful ninjas. The idiot thought he'd be given Hagoromo's power for it. While William did unlock the sealing technique, he had no way of using it on anyone or anything. Each time he tried to perform this highly advanced technique, his chakra depleted to zero, exhausting him for 2 days straight. Jasper would often tease him by calling him Male Karen. Only Naruto fans would understand what Jasper was referencing, and William didn't find the comments pleasing. "All right," Alex said, organizing the room. "Let's all calm down. A lot of us didn't know what to expect. Anyway, I think it's your turn, Jada." Arthur didn't have a rule book to know she had chosen to be an Uchiha. Her hair color was the only one to have turned black, and out of all the clans to choose from, that clan in particular was notorious for having black-haired ninjas. "I chose the Uchiha clan," she confessed. The Uchiha clan, the once elite clan that resided in the village, had their fame spread across the world because of their powerful Sharingan and their natural talent in battle. Their lineage stemmed from one of Hagoromo's 2 sons, Indra Otsutsuki, inheriting his strong bloodline and aptitude for combat. However, the Uchiha were also burdened by a curse, fueling their rivalry with the Senju clan for centuries. Despite their differences, they joined forces with the Senju to establish the Leaf Village, hoping for an era of peace. Suspicion and isolation gradually chipped away at their trust, causing them to feel ostracized by the village leadership. As time passed, they began plotting a coup to seize control. This descent culminated in their downfall, a tragic event in which most Uchiha were killed by Itachi Uchiha and Obito Uchiha to ensure peace in the village. Itachi, a double agent for Leaf Village, could not bring himself to kill all his clanmates, leaving only his brother Sasuke alive. This secret decision left a dark stain in history and ignited a fire for vengeance in Sasuke against his older brother. I actually met Sasuke, Ajita revealed. The Hokage told me that I was delivering food to the orphanage outside the village when the clan massacre happened. When I returned, I was traumatized and left in the hospital for weeks. Jada further added that her character never bonded with Sasuke, with the latter more focused on taking revenge on his brother than making friends. While the two still live in the same district, he avoids her as much as he can. He's still quite the jerk, huh? Alex laughed, nudging Arthur's arm. Her reason for having chosen that clan was because she knew the brother's story well, believing she could rectify it. But nope. Margaret interrupted. She, like every fan out there, just wanted the Sharingan. Admit it, Jada. The two laughed. Knowing that it was her turn to reveal what her choice was, she bit her thumb, drawing blood, performed hand signs, and then slammed her palm on the coffee table. An intricate line of black symbols swirled, creating a puff cloud to appear. When it cleared, a small slug was in its place. I'm sure you can figure out which one I picked. Arthur feigned ignorance, showing how impressed he was. How could he not have known she had chosen the Senju clan? Would you have picked the Uzumaki clan if William hadn't? He wondered. Oh well, duh. And I would have picked a much better sealing technique. Margaret further revealed the two elements she chose, earth and water. In case her 50-50 chance at acquiring wood style failed, she had hoped that the two prerequisite elements might help in the long run. Wood style is a rare Kekkai Genkai that allows the user to create and manipulate wood using their chakra. It combines the power of earth and water and is famously associated with Hashirama. It can be used to grow mighty forests, create intricate wooden structures, and even restrain tailed beasts by draining their chakras. Due to its power and rarity, it has been nearly impossible to replicate since Hashirama's death. Arthur understood why she would covet such an exquisite Kekkai Genkai. But she herself wasn't aware if she had it or not. A time will tell, Margaret claimed with her lips raised. Did you get the other two? Arthur asked. With a suggestive finger over her lips, she hinted that she wasn't going to reveal that information. Not to Arthur, not to anyone. For now. Now it was Alice's turn. She fidgeted in her seat, biting her lip. Unlike the others, her knowledge of Naruto was limited since she had only watched the first part. Alice stammered, I picked the random one. Alex gave a loud gasp, already knowing this. This caused her cheek to burn with embarrassment. Arthur himself found it to be a bold move. So you ended up with the Yamanaka clan? He asked. Alice waved her newly colored hair, saying, It's not that bad. You agreed, William interjected. The Yamanaka with their blonde locks are a valuable clan. They have the mind transfer jutsu and excel at information gathering. They're not flashy fighters, but they're crucial for any team. Alice perked up, but Margaret wasn't convinced. She grumbled, blonde locks. This isn't a fashion show. She could have been an Otsutsuki or at least a Hyuga. We already went through this, Jasper sighed, knowing that his turn was next. As she skipped reading the story, remember? Alice's admission had shifted the spotlight. All eyes turned to Jasper, who leaned back against the wall, a smug grin plastered on his face. All right, he drawled, enjoying the attention. My turn, I suppose. He held his hands up in mock surrender, saying, though, considering the current level of, shall we say, preparation in this room, I might need to explain a few things for our less incompetent players. Just tell him who you picked already. Margaret announced. Undeterred, Jasper continued, the Otsutsuki clan, the pinnacle of power. He gestured dramatically at his white hair. Gets nice, ain't it? The Otsutsuki clan are a race of powerful, parasitic creatures who travel across dimensions seeking places to cultivate and drain their chakra. Feared by some, they possess incredible power and advanced technology. Their ultimate goal is to exploit every world until they reach a higher level of existence. Central to their operations are monstrous organisms grown from tentacle seedlings. These colossal parasites are planted on a planet and leach the energy and genetic material from all things, leaving the world barren and lifeless. Once that parasite matures, a member of the clan harvests its fruit, which grants them immense power. Having consumed that energy, they abandon the husk of that world and move on. They often operate in pairs, with the lower-ranking member sacrificing themselves to provide an initial burst of energy needed to cultivate the parasite. In addition to their advanced technology, Otsutsuki boast a variety of potent abilities. Considering they are predecessors of the Hyuga, many of them can use the Byakugan instinctively. Some Otsutsuki can even awaken the Tensigen, an even more powerful ocular technique that grants immense power and the ability to control the space around them. They can also absorb chakra to replenish their own reserves, fly immense distances, and travel between dimensions through portals. Although they are a formidable threat, their arrival was only written in the third part of the story, a part that was already stated not to be in the simulation. Arthur personally wasn't aware of any Otsutsuki characters save one, Tonari Otsutsuki. He would be featured in one of the last movies, which is also implemented here. A little moment was spent with Jasper explaining the tailed beast whisperer trait. He hadn't tried it yet, knowing it was a passive ability, an ability that worked without needing activation. Speaking of abilities, he said with a mischievous grin, I chose the tool creation jutsu. What does it do? Arthur asked. Alex answered, knowing that a technique like that wouldn't be mentioned in the explanations since it's only in Boruto's movie. I imagine manifesting pure chakra, red and glowing, that you can shape into anything you need, weapons, tools, anything you can imagine. Think superpowered Swiss Army knife meets planet-splitting meteor. And he can control it telekinetically, Jada squeaked. Arthur could hardly believe what he was hearing. He knew that all the clans were unbalanced, but he thought they'd allow something from a different part of the series. Maybe he had nothing to worry about if the players were this strong. All eyes turned to Alex, the last holdout. He shifted under their gazes, pretending to feel uncomfortable. Then with a laugh, he said, process of elimination, my friends. You all know what I chose. With all the aforementioned clans selected, all that was left was clanless and the Hyuga clan. He went with the latter. Arthur asked, what jutsus did you choose from Niji and Hinata? I picked Hinata's Byakugan and Niji's 8 trigrams, style 361, Alex confessed in confidence. The what? Arthur wondered. Style 361, Margaret clarified, rolling her eyes. It's from a video game, not the actual anime. Much like Arthur, the others never knew they could pick jutsu from other sources. When asked about it, Alex shrugged, I just figured I'd give it a shot. You never know, right? But Arthur wasn't convinced. The explanation seemed off. Alex clearly knew something the others didn't. Without any proof, he decided to keep his suspicion to himself. Oh well, William finally said, cleaning his glasses, I for one, am glad he got it. It tells us the people here can also use video game techs. Arthur didn't like the way he said that. First, William called them people, then he seemed too excited about the challenge. At least my eyes didn't turn like them, am I right? Alex laughed. He was right. Most, if not all, Hyuga had pearly white eyes with no pupils. Still kinda creepy when you see the veins bulge from my temples, though. The others laughed. Arthur, one more thing, he added. Since I got those jutsus, it made learning the other gentle fist techniques a breeze. I practically perfected them all in a day. This was nothing to scoff at. The gentle fist is a close-range taijutsu style unique to the Hyuga clan. By using the Byakugan, the user can see the network of channels that carry chakra throughout the body. The gentle fist targets these pathways with pinpoint strikes, injecting a small amount of chakra to disrupt the opponent's chakra flow and damage nearby organs. Even a gentle tap can cause significant internal injuries. By manipulating these pressure points, the user can disrupt an opponent's chakra flow entirely, preventing them from using jutsu techniques. It can also be used for healing purposes by manipulating chakra flow to mend injuries. Very few ninjas have been shown perfecting this fighting style. There's one thing, Arthur said, his voice low. The seal. As a branch member, shouldn't you have the Hyuga clan's cursed seal? Alex smiled. The seal? I don't know what happened to it. I just appeared like this, no seal, and Hayashi, the clan head, told me I was Hinata's brother. Hinata was not just one of the main characters, she was also Naruto's lover and his destined wife. More importantly, she was in the main branch of the Hyuga clan. Arthur's suspicions erupted. This was too convenient. Alex's entire character made no sense. He could have corrected Arthur, stating that being in the branch family wasn't in the description, but he didn't. Arthur heard enough, so he stood up, ready to shed some light. He drew everyone's attention. Has anyone else felt anything off here? He began. Jasper perked up, asking what he meant by off. The pain threshold seems artificially high. Like a video game difficulty setting on extra hard mode. A murmur of agreement spread. Jada answered, yeah, it is a little weird. When I slammed my thumb in the door earlier, it definitely hurt, more than it should have for a virtual world standards. Alice chimed in, so everything feels real. What of it? Arthur shook his head, saying, it's more like a hyper-realistic simulation. And the problem is, I haven't been able to log out. Margaret then burst into laughter and said, log out? Arthur, this isn't some cheap VR game. This is Elysium. It's all part of the experiment. Experiment? Arthur repeated. We weren't told anything about pain being set on high. Margaret waved him dismissively and said, come on, think about it. The whole thing about getting to choose your clan and jutsu, it's all about immersion. They want us to feel like we're actually living in the world of Naruto. And guess what? We can't leave until the game is over. Margaret's explanation didn't hold true. There had been no explanation, no rules, no way to exit this bizarre trap. Arthur glanced at Alex, searching for any sign that he was in on it. But he simply shrugged, saying, she's right, Arthur. It's all about the experience. Worst come to worse, they'll unplug us from the pod and say that we failed. Bull. Arthur thought immediately, a cold dread settling in his stomach. This was more than just a fan's dream come true. This was something far more dangerous. He couldn't trust anyone. None of them knew what he had gone through, nor had they felt the surreal pain that awaited them. They'd been living in a fantasy, a comfortable lifestyle, blinded by the treacherous world around them. 1. Who was behind this scheme? Alex surely had to be playing a role with his convenient lack of a seal and suspiciously fast learning curve. But Arthur couldn't call him or anyone out right now. Accusations would brand him a paranoid fool, or they might think he was insane, a tactical error on his part. 1. What was he going to say? That Dr. Kapoor told him that he'd die for real if he died in their experiment? Alex might interject, or they would claim she was likely using psychology to make him take the game more seriously. Arthur knew better. The searing pain from his battle with that leaf ninja, the raw terror of being captured by bandits, those weren't mere game mechanics. They were visceral reminders of his precarious existence in this world. The hunger pangs, the bone-chilling nights spent in the prison cell, these weren't virtual inconveniences, his life was on the brink of death. He forced a smile of acceptance and said, yeah, you're probably right, Margaret. Gotta go all in for the full experience, right? Inside, however, he was indifferent. The carefully orchestrated lottery win, the convenient localization of the other participants, all of it reeked of a meticulously crafted plan. 7 strangers, handpicked from hundreds of millions, all fluent in English, of which only he was the only one not to have watched Naruto? It was a statistical impossibility bordering on a conspiracy. He took a glance at the others. Were they pawns, or were some of them more knowledgeable collaborators? For now, he had to play along and learn everything he could about them and why he's truly here. So what's happened since we arrived? He asked. Well, William started, it turns out I'm living with Naruto. Can you believe it? The others sighed upon hearing that overused catchphrase. We've been somewhat training together, and we let his story progress like normal. Arthur remembered the story well. A disloyal ninja named Mizuki used Naruto to acquire a secret scroll containing forbidden jutsu. The plot failed, and Mizuki was defeated by him, saving his teacher, Irika Yumino, and becoming a genin in the process. I think this happened yesterday, William added. Naruto even taught me the shadow clone jutsu. The shadow clone jutsu is a powerful technique that creates physical copies of the user. These clones share the user's memories, chakra, and even jutsu abilities. However, the chakra is split evenly between the user and each clone, so creating too many clones can quickly leave the user drained if they have an abundance of chakra stored. The clones themselves are useful for various purposes, such as fighting alongside the user, gathering information, or completing tasks. They also hold a unique advantage for training. When a clone disperses, its experiences and remaining chakra are transferred back to the user, allowing them to compress years of training into a short period. It's also one of Naruto Uzumaki's most overused techniques. Do you all know shadow clones too? Arthur asked. And not all of us, Alex answered. Only Will and Jada know it. Margaret blurted out, I'm just saving myself for wood clones, so much better. A strange statement to make since it hadn't been confirmed if she could use wood style yet, a prerequisite to wood clones. William continued, emphasizing that Naruto and him make a great team. The two have shared ramen and engaged in childish pranks around the village. Best be careful, Jasper reminded him. The insinuation was that if William's not careful, Naruto might see him as his best friend, preventing Sasuke from reawakening the Sharingan. Arthur found it strange that they were trying to follow the story. Before interjecting anything, he allowed Jada to speak. She said softly, at the Uchiha compound, Sasuke is still Sasuke, very closed off. He avoids me most of the time, and I haven't been able to awaken my Sharingan yet. Jada seemed to be innocent in all of this. Encouragingly, he said to her, Don't worry, Jada. It takes time. But remember, the Sharingan isn't the only path to becoming a strong ninja. Jada, in return, offered a grateful smile at the kind words. Margaret, however, said in a bashful tone, Who cares about the Sharingan? I'm just waiting for Tsunade's arc to unlock some cool jutsus. She leaned toward William, holding him by the arm. Speaking of main characters, did you know Will emptied his entire savings to buy us this fancy apartment? Arthur blinked in surprise, asking why he would do that. I suggested it, of course. We can't very well stay apart, can we? Arthur cast a bewildered glance at William, who blushed furiously. When Margaret said we, she was referring to herself, Jada, and Alice. He looked at Alice, waiting to hear her background. Apparently, she said. I'm a very distant cousin of Ino Yamanaka. I have my own place and all, but Margaret and Jada offered to share their place instead. The Yamanaka clan are specialists in mind-related jutsu throughout the Leaf Village. They possess unique techniques for interrogation, information gathering, and telepathy. This makes them invaluable for espionage and intelligence gathering. They traditionally lead the village's barrier team and are known for their long ponytails. They have also had a special bond with the Nara and Akimichi clans, forming a special team that has spanned generations. And you, Jasper? Arthur asked, turning his attention to him. Where did you stay? Jasper smirked, answering, The village has no idea what an Otsutsuki clan is, but like the rest of us, I'm still registered as a ninja. No family or anything, but Pretty Boy here suggested we bunk together in the apartment next door. Arthur looked to Alex, who explained that since he was in the main family of the Hyuga clan, they funded their living arrangements. What do you mean by the rest of us? Arthur pondered, feeling a knot of suspicion. Is that including me? Alex couldn't help but marvel at Arthur's wisdom, so he answered, Yep, you're also registered as a genin. We were told by Irika that you went missing. Safe to say it was all part of the game. Speaking of game, Arthur added. Tell me, what happened when you arrived in the Hyuga compound? Did they welcome you with open arms? It wasn't exactly a family reunion, he admitted, but Hayashi explained that I was Hinata's fraternal twin brother or something. The branch house members weren't thrilled about me moving out, but hey, at least I have a place to stay. Arthur watched Alex carefully, waiting for him to slip up. Mentioning the doctor stated that due to genetics, his eyes retained normalcy as opposed to his Hyuga counterparts, the clan still treated him as one of their own. Arthur decided to go deeper and test them more. Casually, he said, Everyone seems to be adapting pretty quickly. What's the end goal exactly other than survival? Margaret stretched languidly, letting out a yawn before saying, "The end goal, Arthur? Come on, you're not seriously asking that, are you? It's Naruto, the ultimate ninja dream come true. We get to live the story, become heroes, learn awesome jutsu. What more could you want?" Arthur wasn't remotely convinced. Naruto was a story that spanned 3 years. He countered, asking about how their bodies will fare once they finish things. "Pretty sure we're not gonna be in the pods for that long," Alex answered. "I think I read somewhere that 1 hour in the pods is like 1 year in here or something." Where'd you read that?" Jasper wondered. "It's in the technical designs written on the Enclave MK, too, duh?" Arthur would remember Alex saying that. He placed his attention back on Margaret, believing that her answer felt scripted, lacking any real depth. William's nerdish enthusiasm stood up to explain, "I think our goal isn't just to live out the story, it's to rewrite it." Arthur immediately knew what he meant by that. He wanted to eliminate all the tragedies that unfolded. And despite everyone's silence, they appeared to have accepted this task. Naruto's story was riddled with hardship and loss. From the very beginning, the main character was ostracized by the villagers due to the 9 tails sealed within him. This isolation fueled a deep loneliness that he carried throughout his childhood. Sasuke Uchiha, consumed by vengeance, walked a dark path. Unaware of Itachi's true motives for slaughtering their clan, he believed his brother to be a villain. This misunderstanding fueled his hatred and drove him away from his friends and village. Neji Hyuga, born into a branch family of his clan, endured a life of prejudice and limitations. The main branch of the clan branded him with a cursed seal, a constant reminder of his supposed inferiority. This treatment instilled a deep-seated resentment within him. Madara Uchiha, a powerful but bitter shinobi, orchestrated tragedies throughout the series. He manipulated Obito Uchiha, a young and idealistic ninja, into darkness. Obito, consumed by grief and vengeance after witnessing his friend Rin's death, became a pawn in Madara's schemes. Similarly, Nagato, an orphan child burdened by war, fell prey to Madara's manipulation. Witnessing the death of his friend Yahiko, he embraced a path of destruction under Madara's influence. The deaths of these characters don't end there. Orochimaru, obsessed with immortality, attempted a village invasion, leading to the death of the 3rd Hokage. In the Land of Wind, Haku, a loyal but misguided young man, gave his life to shield his partner, Zabuza Momochi, the cold-hearted mercenary. Chiyo, a renowned user of puppets, sacrificed herself in a forbidden jutsu to revive Gaara, a Jinchuriki like Naruto. Asuma, a mentor of Naruto, once fell victim to the Akatsuki, a criminal organization. Jiraiya, Naruto's godfather and a powerful Sannin, perished in a desperate attempt to gather intel on Nagato, Pain, the leader of the Akatsuki. Even political corruption wasn't shy away from. Danzo Shimura, a power-hungry elder of the Leaf Village, manipulated others to serve his own agenda. His ruthless methods cast a shadow over the village's leadership and more. And lastly was Neji's death during the 4th Shinobi World War. Though his death protected Naruto and Hinata, it felt scripted, highlighting the story's disregard for itself. "Think about it," Alice said. "No more detested Naruto, brooding Sasuke, or Neji's whole family drama." Jasper, in agreement, chimed in, "We can stop Obito and Nagato before talk no jutsu." "Let's not forget," Margaret added, "we can stop Haku from sacrificing himself and protect Hiruzen from using the Reaper Death Seal." They listed all the possible ways of preventing the heartbreaking moments, possessing both knowledge and assured clarity on how to thwart them. Arthur's mind reeled. Rewriting a whole narrative, a universe with its own established history and tragic heroes? It sounded ludicrous, even bordering on arrogant. They were here to save this world and play along with its preordained story, while he was still focused on tearing it apart and exposing the truth about their predicament. He needed to bide his time and learn as much as possible about their plan before coming up with a strategy. Otherwise, acting on the level he is now would brand him a madman. 1. "I see," he said in a neutral tone. "That's certainly ambitious." The others seemed oblivious to his internal struggle. Margaret clapped her hands gleefully, saying, "It's practically written in the stars. We just have to nudge things along a bit." Jasper, however, remained skeptical. He knew it was easier said than done. In case Arthur felt indifferent, Alex assured him that they wouldn't be manipulating the entire world, just making some adjustments for a better ending. They would be subtle, influencing events without rewriting major plot points. Remembering that their choices can have unintended consequences, each of them agreed to let the others know of any game-breaking actions. After reluctantly agreeing to help them, they informed Arthur that Irika was going to announce the genin teams 2 days from now. 2 days was more than enough time for him. He couldn't risk revealing his true agenda, but he could certainly play along with their plan for now. 1. For the remainder of his time here, they revealed their tactics, formulating a well-thought-out strategy to help them make it to the end. Arthur absorbed their plan, feeling disappointed at their naivety. They each had potential, and they would surely become apex predators in the end, thanks to their knowledge. But what will happen if one of them dies? Will they truly be released even if they stop the next war? Arthur wouldn't dare let their lives be ruined. To save them, he had to expose the truth and dismantle this whole world, even if it meant going against everyone in this room.